You've probably already forgotten half of these by the time you finish. This happens not because you are careless, distracted, or incapable, but because your brain is engineered to forget. Forgetting is not a flaw in your mind. It is a survival mechanism. The brain constantly decides what deserves to stay and what must dissolve, often before you realize a decision was made. Every moment, your senses deliver more data than your mind could ever hold. To prevent overload, your brain compresses, trims, and discards information at incredible speed. Facts without emotional charge are usually the first to go. Even interesting ideas fade quickly when they fail to connect to identity, relevance, or feeling. This is why insight can feel powerful while reading, yet vanish minutes later. What makes this unsettling is how convincing the illusion of remembering feels. Your attention creates confidence, not retention. While you feel engaged, your brain is quietly erasing, prioritizing future usefulness over present interest. Emotion interrupts this erasure. When something triggers fear, awe, curiosity, or belonging, it resists deletion. That is why emotionally charged moments anchor themselves deep in memory. Forgetting also reshapes what remains. Memories are not stored intact. They are reconstructed, simplified, and bent toward expectation. Each loss subtly alters the story you believe you remember. This means forgetting is active, creative, and constant. Much of what enters your mind never fully arrives, yet this quiet disappearance is what allows thought, focus, and meaning to exist at all. Without this filtering, consciousness would drown, overwhelmed by noise, incapable of choosing, caring, or sustaining a coherent sense of self over time. Your brain edits reality before you see it. Everything you see is slightly delayed. Your brain edits reality before you see it. Everything you experience is already in the past. What feels like the present moment is actually a carefully constructed replay, delayed by fractions of a second while your brain processes, filters, and predicts what you are about to perceive. You never experience raw reality. You experience a version of it that has been cleaned up, adjusted, and made coherent enough to survive. Light hits your eyes, signals travel through nerves, and your brain races to interpret shapes, colors, motion, and meaning. During this time, it fills gaps, smooths transitions, and removes inconsistencies. The delay is tiny, but it is constant. You are always behind reality, living in a mental reconstruction that feels immediate only because your brain hides the lag. To compensate, your brain predicts the future. It guesses what should happen next and overlays that prediction onto perception. When predictions are accurate, reality feels seamless. When they fail, you notice glitches, optical illusions, sudden confusion, or that brief shock when something unexpected happens. These moments expose the editing process you normally never see. This editing keeps you safe. A fully unfiltered world would be chaotic and unbearable. Your brain suppresses irrelevant details, stabilizes motion, and maintains continuity so you can act without hesitation. It sacrifices accuracy for usability. Truth is negotiable if survival is at stake. The unsettling implication is that certainty is fragile. What you trust as immediate truth has already been altered. You do not witness the world as it is, but as your brain believes it should be. This realization can feel disorienting, even unsettling, because it means perception is not a window, but a story, one written in real time, edited without your consent, and presented so convincingly that you rarely question whether you are seeing reality or merely the best possible guess your mind can assemble. If you unfolded all your DNA, it would reach Pluto and back. If you unfolded all your DNA, it would reach Pluto and back, not once, but multiple times. This fact sounds exaggerated because the scale of what exists inside you is almost impossible to emotionally grasp. Every cell in your body carries a tightly coiled thread of DNA measuring about 2 meters long. Multiply that by the trillions of cells that make you who you are, and suddenly your body becomes less a physical object and more a vast, compressed universe. What makes this overwhelming is how invisible it all is. You feel solid, contained, finite. Yet inside you exists an unfathomable length of biological instruction, folded so precisely that it fits inside microscopic nuclei without tangling into chaos. This compression is not accidental. It is the result of billions of years of evolution solving a problem that feels almost poetic: how to store an infinite amount of information in a finite space. That DNA holds the instructions for your eye color, your heartbeat, your fears, and even the way your brain reacts to stress or love. It is a record of ancient survival, carrying echoes of ancestors who lived, adapted, and endured long before you existed. You are not just alive, you are a continuation. The emotional weight of this lies in contrast. You can feel small, insignificant, or temporary, yet your body contains something vast enough to span planets. This doesn't make you powerful in a dramatic sense, but it makes you profound. Every moment you exist, that DNA is copying itself, repairing damage, and preserving continuity against constant threat. You are walking proof that immensity can exist inside fragility. Something cosmic is folded into you so quietly that you never feel its weight, yet it defines everything you are without ever asking for your attention. There are bacteria in your body that are not you and never will be. There are bacteria in your body that are not you and never will be. They live on you, inside you, and through you, yet they do not belong to your identity, your thoughts, or your intentions. From the moment you are born, you become a host, not a singular organism, but an ecosystem. Trillions of microscopic lives take up residence in your gut, on your skin, and in places you never think about, shaping your health without ever asking permission. What makes this unsettling is how essential they are. These organisms help you digest food, regulate your immune system, and even influence your mood. Without them, your body would struggle to function. And yet, they are not you. They do not share your memories, values, or sense of self. They operate according to their own biological rules, reproducing, adapting, and surviving in parallel with your life. Your sense of individuality quietly depends on this invisible collective. The boundaries of you are not as clear as they feel. Chemicals produced by these bacteria can affect how anxious you feel, how hungry you are, and how your brain responds to stress. Thoughts you believe are purely yours may be influenced by organisms that will never know you exist. This realization can feel destabilizing. You are not alone in your own body. You are outnumbered, coexisting with life that benefits from you but does not care about you. Yet this relationship is not hostile. It is a fragile truce built on mutual survival. Your body is less a fortress and more a shared space, where control is negotiated rather than absolute. You remain yourself, but you are never entirely alone, even in silence.
You've never actually seen your own face, only reflections.
You've never actually seen your own face, only reflections. Every image you associate with you is a reversal, a surface interpretation, a mediated version shaped by glass, screens, and light. The face you believe is yours exists only as an approximation, filtered through mirrors and cameras that subtly distort proportions, flip orientation, and freeze expressions that never naturally exist in motion. This creates a quiet, psychological gap between who you are and who you believe you look like. You grow familiar with a version of yourself that no one else ever sees. Others encounter your face dynamically, unflipped, animated, alive in real time. You encounter it as an object, detached, often judged more harshly because it feels unfamiliar. This is why photographs can feel unsettling. They reveal a face that contradicts the internal image you've rehearsed for years. Your brain bonds to the reflected version through repetition. Familiarity breeds comfort, even if it's inaccurate. When that comfort is disrupted, discomfort follows. It can feel like seeing a stranger who claims to be you. This disconnect subtly shapes self-esteem, identity, and how you imagine yourself existing in the world. What makes this emotionally potent is that your face is the symbol of your identity. It's how others recognize you, remember you, and attach meaning to you. Yet, your relationship with it is indirect. You trust a proxy. You build confidence or insecurity around an image that is never fully real. This means your sense of self is partly constructed from something you can never truly verify. You carry a mental portrait shaped by reflections, reactions, and assumptions. The real version of your face lives only in other people's perception, constantly changing, never fully accessible to you, and quietly reminding you that even your most personal identity is partly out of reach. The universe has no confirmed center. The universe has no confirmed center, and that idea quietly dismantles one of the most comforting assumptions the human mind holds. We are wired to believe that everything must revolve around something, that there is a middle point where meaning gathers and structure begins. But when it comes to the universe, no such anchor has ever been found, no cosmic core, no central throne, no privileged position where existence originates or converges. Everywhere appears to be expanding away from everything else. From any point you stand, it looks as if you are at the center, not because you are special, but because expansion happens uniformly in all directions. This means the feeling of centrality is an illusion produced by perspective, not position. The universe does not offer a reference point to orient meaning around. This is emotionally unsettling because humans crave orientation. A center implies importance, hierarchy, and direction. Without one, the universe feels indifferent, almost evasive. There is no ultimate here, no final place to point to and say, this is where it all truly is. Meaning is not embedded in the structure of the cosmos. It is something observers bring with them. What deepens the discomfort is the realization that this applies to you as well. You are not closer to the center than anyone else because no one is. Your location in space carries no inherent privilege, no cosmic weight. And yet, your experience feels central because consciousness insists on framing itself as the reference point. This tension between personal centrality and universal decentralization creates a quiet existential pressure. You feel significant while knowing the universe does not confirm it. There is no spatial reassurance, no cosmic validation, only motion, expansion, and silence continuing without preference, forcing meaning to exist without permission or placement. Every 2 minutes, humans take more photos than the entire 1800s combined. Every 2 minutes, humans take more photos than the entire 1800s combined. This fact sounds impressive at first, but it becomes unsettling the longer you sit with it. Photography was once an act of intention. A moment had to matter enough to be chosen, framed, and preserved. Now, moments are captured by reflex, not meaning, recorded faster than they can be felt. Your brain was never designed to experience life through constant documentation. When you take a photo, part of your attention shifts away from the moment itself and toward preserving proof that it happened. Memory quietly weakens as the camera takes over the job of remembering. The image replaces the experience, and over time, you remember the photo more clearly than the feeling that led you to take it. This explosion of images creates a strange paradox. Nothing has ever been recorded so thoroughly, yet nothing has ever felt so disposable. Photos pile up endlessly, rarely revisited, buried under newer ones almost immediately. Moments that once would have stood out are flattened into sameness, reduced to visual noise scrolling past your eyes. Emotionally, this changes how value is assigned. Experiences feel incomplete unless they are captured. Joy feels temporary unless it is shared. Presence competes with performance. You begin to live slightly ahead of yourself, anticipating how a moment will look rather than how it feels. The unsettling truth is that abundance does not preserve meaning, it dilutes it. When everything is documented, nothing feels rare. When every second is saved, memory loses its weight. The camera never forgets, but the human mind does, quietly surrendering depth for volume, connection for capture, and lived reality for endless proof that it existed at all. You can feel pain in dreams, even though nothing touches you. You can feel pain in dreams, even though nothing touches you. Your body lies still, safe, untouched by the outside world, yet your mind can generate sensations so real they jolt you awake in panic or leave your heart racing long after your eyes open. This happens because pain is not born in the body, it is constructed in the brain. The body only sends signals. The brain decides what those signals mean. When you dream, the part of your brain responsible for imagination becomes intensely active, while the systems that normally verify reality go quiet. There is no external input, no physical cause, yet the neural circuits responsible for sensation fire anyway. To your brain, the pain is real because the same pathways are activated as if something truly happened. The experience does not need permission from reality to exist. This reveals something deeply unsettling about consciousness. If your mind can create pain from nothing, it means suffering does not always require a cause. The brain can replay fear, injury, or threat entirely on its own. This is why nightmares linger emotionally. Even after you wake up, your nervous system remembers the pain as something that actually occurred. Emotion amplifies this effect. Pain in dreams is often tied to fear, helplessness, or loss of control. Your brain uses pain as a signal, a way to force attention, even when there is nothing to escape from. The experience feels personal, invasive, and undeniable. This ability exposes how thin the boundary is between imagination and reality. Your mind does not need the world to hurt you. It can do it alone, convincingly, silently, and without warning. And because the pain felt real in the moment, your body responds as if it was, proving that perception, not contact, is what truly defines experience. There are sounds you physically cannot hear, no matter how loud they are. There are sounds you physically cannot hear, no matter how loud they are. And this reveals a quiet limitation built into your perception of reality. Your ears are not open windows to all vibration. They are narrow filters, tuned to a small frequency range that evolution decided was useful for survival. Beyond that range, entire soundscapes exist in complete silence to you, even if they are shaking the world around you. This means loudness is not the same as audibility. A sound can be powerful, disruptive, even violent in energy, and still pass through you without leaving the faintest trace. Ultrasound moves through matter unnoticed. Infrasound rolls across landscapes, influencing animals and weather, while you remain unaware. Your silence does not mean nothing is happening. It means your biology has drawn a line. The unsettling part is how convincing your sensory completeness feels. You trust what you hear as a representation of what exists, rarely questioning what might be excluded. But your brain can only interpret signals your body is equipped to receive. Everything else is filtered out before it ever becomes experience. Absence of perception becomes mistaken for absence of reality. This limitation extends beyond sound. It reflects a deeper truth about human awareness. You navigate the world with confidence while missing vast layers of information, never knowing what you are not sensing. There could be patterns, warnings, or forces unfolding around you that your mind is structurally incapable of detecting. Realizing this can feel disorienting. It means reality is louder, deeper, and more complex than you will ever know. You move through a world full of silence, not because it is quiet, but because your senses have already decided what you are allowed to hear. You are technically older than your birthday. Time dilation exists. You are technically older than your birthday, and this isn't poetic exaggeration or philosophical wordplay. It is a measurable consequence of time dilation, a real effect predicted by physics and confirmed by experiment. Time does not move at the same speed everywhere, and it does not move at the same speed for everyone. Even while you read this, time is treating you slightly differently than it treats others. Your birthday assumes time is uniform, clean, and shared equally. In reality, every moment you experience is shaped by motion and gravity. Because you are constantly moving through space, on a rotating planet, orbiting a star, traveling through a galaxy, your clock ticks at a subtly different rate than clocks in other conditions. The difference is tiny, but it is real. Over a lifetime, those fractions accumulate. Your age is not a single number, it is a range. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how deeply it challenges intuition. You feel anchored to a timeline, as if time is a straight line you are walking along with everyone else, but you are not walking in sync. No one is. Each person carries their own private version of time, drifting slightly out of alignment with the rest of the universe. This means your life has already taken longer than it appears. You have existed through more time than your calendar admits. The present moment is not shared evenly. It is stitched together from billions of overlapping nows, none perfectly aligned. The idea quietly destabilizes certainty. If time itself bends, then age, timing, and even too late or too early become less rigid than they feel. You are older than your birthday says, younger than you feel, and moving through a universe where even time refuses to stay still. The brain sometimes invents memories to fill gaps. And it does so without asking for your permission or announcing the substitution. When information is missing, unclear, or fragmented, your brain prioritizes continuity over accuracy. It would rather give you a believable story than admit uncertainty. What you experience as a memory may not be a record at all, but a reconstruction assembled from assumptions, emotions, and scattered details. Memory is not a storage system. It is a prediction system. Each time you recall something, your brain rebuilds it in real time, using whatever pieces are available. When pieces are missing, it fills them in with what feels right. Familiar faces replace unknown ones. Plausible dialogue replaces silence. Emotional tone replaces factual detail. The result feels solid because confidence is generated alongside the memory itself. This is emotionally unsettling because memories feel sacred. They shape identity, justify decisions, and anchor relationships. Realizing that some of them may be partially fictional threatens the idea of a stable past. Yet, the brain does this to protect you. Gaps in memory feel dangerous. Uncertainty triggers anxiety. A smooth narrative feels safer, even if it bends the truth. These invented memories are not lies in the traditional sense. They are compromises. The brain is less concerned with what happened than with what makes sense now. This is why two people can remember the same event differently and both feel absolutely certain. Each brain filled the gaps in its own way. What makes this powerful is how invisible the process is. You do not feel memories being edited. You feel them as facts. Over time, repetition hardens them. The more you recall a memory, the more confident you become, even if it drifted further from reality with each retelling. This means your past is not fixed. It is alive, reshaped constantly by who you are in the present, quietly rewriting itself to preserve meaning, coherence, and emotional survival. There are places on Earth where gravity is slightly stronger. And this challenges the comforting assumption that the ground beneath you behaves the same everywhere. Gravity feels constant because your body has adapted to it so completely that you rarely question its presence. Yet the pull holding you to the planet subtly changes depending on where you stand, shaped by Earth's uneven mass, rotation, and hidden density beneath the surface. These differences are small, far too subtle for your body to consciously notice, but they are real and measurable. Mountains, underground structures, and variations in Earth's crust all contribute to tiny fluctuations in gravitational strength. Even the planet's spin causes gravity to weaken near the equator and strengthen toward the poles. The force you trust to be absolute is quietly inconsistent. What makes this unsettling is not the physical effect, but the implication. You rely on gravity as a constant, an invisible agreement between you and the planet. Discovering that this agreement shifts depending on location introduces a subtle instability into something you thought was fixed. The rules feel solid only because your perception smooths them out. Your brain simplifies the world to keep you functional. It presents gravity as uniform so you can move, balance, and exist without hesitation. But beneath that simplicity lies a more complex reality, one that does not fully align with your intuitive understanding. This realization invites a quiet discomfort. It suggests that even the most fundamental forces you depend on are not perfectly stable, only stable enough. The world holds you, but not equally everywhere, and you walk through these invisible gradients without ever knowing where the pull on you is strongest. The color you see doesn't exist outside your brain. The color you see doesn't exist outside your brain. What you experience as color is not a property of the world itself, but a translation your mind creates to make sense of raw information. Objects do not contain color. They reflect light at different wavelengths, and your brain interprets those wavelengths into something meaningful. Color is not discovered, it is invented. Light enters your eyes as energy, not as red, blue, or green. Specialized cells react to these signals and send electrical impulses to your brain, which then constructs the sensation you recognize as color. Without a brain to interpret it, the world is colorless. There is only light bouncing endlessly through space, indifferent to how vivid or dull it feels to you. This is emotionally unsettling because color feels intimate and absolute. You trust it. You build memories around it. The blue of the sky, the warmth of sunset, the specific shade of someone's eyes, these feel like shared truths, yet no one can ever see color exactly as you do. Even if we use the same words, your red may not be my red. There is no way to verify it. Your brain assigns color based on context, expectation, and comparison. This is why colors change under different lighting, why illusions work, and why memory can alter how something once looked. Color adapts to keep your world stable, not accurate. The deeper implication is that reality is negotiable. If something as fundamental as color exists only in your mind, then much of what feels solid is actually interpretation layered over chaos. You don't perceive the world directly. You experience a version optimized for survival, comfort, and coherence. Color feels like beauty, but it is also proof of distance. Between the world as it is and the world as you experience it, your brain quietly fills the gap, painting meaning onto light and convincing you it was always there. Some people hear shapes and see sounds, synesthesia. Some people hear shapes and see sounds, a phenomenon known as synesthesia, where the brain blends senses that are normally kept separate. For these individuals, a sound may appear as a flash of color. A letter may carry a specific taste, or a shape may trigger a physical sensation. This is not imagination or metaphor. It is perception. Their brains genuinely experience the world in overlapping sensory layers. What makes synesthesia so compelling is how automatic it is. The associations are not chosen or learned consciously. A sound might always be blue. A number might always feel sharp. These connections remain stable across a lifetime, forming a private but consistent reality that feels as natural as sight or hearing does to everyone else. The brain, instead of separating information into neat channels, allows them to spill into one another. Emotionally, this reveals how subjective reality truly is. You assume that what you see, hear, and feel is roughly what everyone else experiences. Synesthesia quietly breaks that assumption. It shows that perception is not a shared standard, but a personal construction. Two people can stand in the same room, hear the same sound, and live in entirely different sensory worlds. This blending often intensifies emotion and memory. Synesthetes may remember information more vividly because it is encoded across multiple senses. A song is not just heard, it is seen. A word is not just read, it is felt. This depth can be beautiful, overwhelming, or both. What unsettles most is the implication. If the brain can wire senses together this way, then perception is far more flexible than it feels. Reality is not fixed at the edges of your senses. It is shaped by neural shortcuts, cross-connections, and silent interpretations you never question. Synesthesia exposes a quiet truth. The world you experience is not the world as it is, but the world as your brain allows it to appear. Your body replaces most of its atoms every few years, yet you feel continuous. Your body replaces most of its atoms every few years, yet you feel continuous, intact, and unchanged. This creates a quiet contradiction at the center of your existence. On a physical level, you are not the same material you were years ago. Atoms enter and leave your body through breathing, eating, and shedding, slowly swapping out nearly everything that once made you up. And yet, you experience yourself as a single, uninterrupted self. This persistence of identity is not physical. It is constructed. Your brain maintains continuity by weaving memory, emotion, and narrative into a seamless story. Even as the material foundation of your body is replaced piece by piece, your mind insists on sameness. You recognize yourself in the mirror not because the atoms match, but because the story does. What makes this emotionally unsettling is the fragility of that continuity. If the body can change completely while the self feels stable, then identity is less solid than it seems. You are not anchored to matter, but to pattern. The arrangement persists, not the substance. You are a process, not an object. This understanding can feel both grounding and destabilizing. It means loss, aging, and change are already happening constantly, just slowly enough to feel invisible. You are always becoming someone new while believing you are the same. The feeling of continuity is a gift of perception, not proof of permanence. Your mind protects you from the truth of constant replacement because awareness of total flux would be paralyzing. You move forward because you feel whole, even though the physical you is always quietly dissolving and reforming beneath that comforting illusion. You've already lived through at least one statistically impossible coincidence. You've already lived through at least one statistically impossible coincidence, even if you never noticed it when it happened. This isn't optimism or exaggeration. It's a consequence of probability operating at scale. When billions of people live billions of moments, events that should never happen become inevitable. The impossible doesn't announce itself. It slips quietly into ordinary life and disguises itself as chance. Your brain is poor at understanding large numbers. It treats rare events as impossible and common events as normal, even when the math disagrees. Somewhere in your past, two unlikely variables aligned at the exact right moment. You met someone you statistically shouldn't have. You avoided something you statistically shouldn't have escaped. You were in the wrong place at the right time, or the right place at the wrong time, and the outcome bent your life in a way you can't fully trace. What makes this unsettling is how invisible these moments are. You don't feel the roads not taken. You don't experience the versions of yourself that never happened. You only feel the path that survived. Probability collapses into certainty after the fact, and your brain rewrites coincidence into narrative. It tells you it makes sense now, even when it never truly did. Emotionally, this realization destabilizes control. It means parts of your identity, your relationships, and your survival are built on events so unlikely they border on absurd. You are not just the result of intention and effort, but of cosmic noise resolving in your favor at least once. The most haunting part is this: you will never know which coincidence mattered most. The moment that changed everything may have felt insignificant, forgettable, or ordinary, and yet, without it, you would not be here as you are now, reading this, assuming your life followed a logical path when probability was quietly steering the wheel. The universe might be infinite, or folded like paper. The universe might be infinite, or it might be folded like paper. And the most unsettling part is that both possibilities are equally plausible. Scientists have not been able to determine whether space goes on forever or curves back in on itself in ways that defy everyday intuition. The universe could stretch endlessly beyond what we can ever observe, or it could loop, bend, or fold, so that traveling far enough in one direction might eventually bring you back to where you started. Your brain resists this idea because it is built for edges. Rooms have walls. Roads have ends. Stories have conclusions. Infinity breaks this structure. It offers no boundary, no final reference point, no comforting sense of completion. A folded universe is no easier. It suggests reality behaves more like abstract geometry than physical space, where straight lines can curve and distance loses its meaning. What makes this emotionally charged is how small it makes certainty feel. Everything you know exists inside a cosmic structure whose shape you cannot visualize and may never fully understand. The rules that govern your daily life dissolve at this scale. Space stops behaving intuitively. Logic bends. Familiar concepts like direction, distance, and center begin to fail. If the universe is infinite, then no matter how far humanity advances, there will always be more beyond reach. If it is folded, then reality is more constrained and strange than it appears, hiding shortcuts and repetitions beneath the illusion of vastness. Either way, your sense of place becomes fragile. This uncertainty forces a quiet confrontation. You live your life making plans, setting limits, and imagining futures, all within a cosmos whose structure refuses to settle into something comforting. The universe does not explain itself. It simply exists, vast or curved or both, indifferent to whether your mind can hold it. And yet, you are conscious inside it, trying to understand a space that may have no end or no simple shape, while standing on a small planet, thinking thoughts that somehow matter anyway. You've likely walked past someone who will remember you forever. You've likely walked past someone who will remember you forever, even though you may have no memory of them at all. This happens more often than you realize, hidden inside ordinary moments that feel insignificant to you. A glance held a second too long, a brief smile, a tone of voice, the way you stood or spoke at the exact right moment in their life. To you, it was nothing. To them, it became something permanent. Human memory is not fair or balanced. It does not record importance objectively. It records impact. Someone might encounter you during a moment of vulnerability, confusion, loneliness, or transformation, and your presence becomes tied to that emotional state. You become a reference point in their internal story, not because of who you are, but because of when you appeared. What makes this unsettling is the asymmetry. You continue living unaware, while a version of you exists vividly in someone else's mind, frozen in time. They may remember your face, your words, or simply the feeling you created. That version of you never ages, never changes, never explains itself. It just remains. This reveals how little control you have over the impressions you leave behind. You are constantly shaping memories you will never witness. Your smallest actions ripple outward into lives you do not track, influencing emotions, decisions, and self-perception in ways you will never be told about. The emotional weight comes from realizing that significance does not require intention. You do not have to mean something to matter. You are already woven into other people's inner worlds simply by existing among them. Your life overlaps with countless unseen narratives, leaving traces you will never retrieve. Yet that will continue to live quietly inside someone else, long after you've forgotten the moment entirely. A single human cell is more complex than New York City. A single human cell is more complex than New York City, and this is not metaphorical exaggeration. It is a literal comparison of systems, coordination, and information flow. Inside one microscopic cell exists a self-regulating world of factories, power plants, transport networks, waste disposal systems, security checks, and communication signals operating simultaneously with no central commander. All of it fits inside something you cannot see with the naked eye. What makes this emotionally jarring is how casually you inhabit this complexity. You don't feel it working. You don't sense the billions of chemical reactions firing every second to keep you alive. While a city requires external maintenance, conscious planning, and constant repair, your cells perform these tasks autonomously. They read instructions, correct errors, respond to threats, and adapt to damage in real time, all without awareness or permission. Each cell contains instructions dense enough to build you from nothing and precise enough to keep you functioning moment by moment. It knows when to divide, when to specialize, and when to self-destruct for the greater good. That last part matters. Cells are capable of choosing death to protect the system. There is a quiet intelligence here that doesn't feel like intelligence, but behaves like it. The unsettling implication is scale. You may feel simple, flawed, or disorganized, yet you are composed of trillions of entities performing miracles continuously. Your exhaustion, confusion, or doubt exist on top of a level of order so advanced it dwarfs human engineering. This reframes fragility. You are not weak because you are simple. You are fragile because you are unimaginably complex, and complexity always carries risk. Every breath, thought, and movement depends on cities within you, never shutting down, never pausing, never knowing you exist, yet working tirelessly so you can believe your life is ordinary. Your thoughts have mass, tiny but real. Your thoughts have mass, tiny but real, because thinking is not an abstract, weightless act. Every thought you form requires physical change inside your brain. Neurons fire, ions move, chemicals shift position, and energy is consumed. According to physics, energy and mass are linked. When your brain uses energy to think, it creates an almost immeasurable increase in mass, not enough to feel, not enough to weigh, but enough to exist. This fact is unsettling because thoughts feel intangible. They feel like whispers, ideas, inner movements with no physical footprint. Yet each thought slightly alters the physical state of your brain. When you remember something painful, when you imagine a future, when you spiral into worry or feel a rush of hope, matter is rearranging itself inside your skull. Thinking literally changes what you are made of, even if only by a fraction. What gives this emotional weight is the implication that your inner life is not separate from your body. Your fears are not just feelings. Your beliefs are not just opinions. They are physical events with consequences. Repeated thoughts strengthen certain neural pathways, making future thoughts more likely to follow the same route. Over time, your habits of thinking shape the structure of your brain itself. This means your mind is not floating above your biology. It is embedded in it. Every moment of attention, rumination, or imagination leaves a trace. You are carrying the accumulated weight of your thinking history, not metaphorically, but materially. The unsettling beauty of this is responsibility. If thoughts have mass, then what you repeatedly think quietly shapes what you become. Not instantly, not dramatically, but persistently. You are not just thinking thoughts, you are physically reinforcing them, turning invisible moments into lasting structure. Your inner world is not harmless or neutral. It is active, influential, and real. Even in silence, even when no one sees it, your mind is doing work that leaves a mark. There are smells you'll never smell because they went extinct. There are smells you'll never smell because they went extinct, erased quietly as the world changed without asking your permission. This is difficult to grasp because scent feels timeless, like something always waiting to be rediscovered. But smells depend on living sources, chemical environments, and biological processes that can vanish permanently. When a species disappears, when a forest is cut down, when an ecosystem collapses, an entire sensory experience can disappear with it. Unlike images or sounds, smells are almost impossible to preserve. There is no true recording of scent, no archive that can fully reconstruct what once filled the air. Descriptions fail because smell bypasses language and goes straight to memory and emotion. You cannot imagine a scent you have never encountered. If it is gone in a way your mind cannot replace. What makes this emotionally heavy is how deeply smell is tied to feeling. Scent is the sense most closely linked to memory, capable of pulling emotions from places you didn't know still existed. This means some emotional experiences are no longer accessible to humanity at all. Entire moods, comforts, and sensations have vanished without leaving a trace you could ever feel. Your world is already missing things you never knew to mourn. The air you breathe carries fewer stories than it once did. You move through environments stripped of layers your ancestors experienced effortlessly. This loss feels abstract because it is invisible, but invisibility does not mean absence. The unsettling truth is that extinction doesn't just remove life forms, it removes experiences. Reality itself becomes thinner over time, not only visually or biologically, but emotionally. There are sensations your nervous system was capable of experiencing that the world will never offer you again, no matter how curious, attentive, or alive you are. You don't feel time passing, you infer it afterward. You don't feel time passing, you infer it afterward. This fact feels unsettling because it contradicts daily experience. Life seems to move, moments seem to flow, seconds appear to tick. Yet in the instant you are alive, there is no sensation of time moving. Your brain never detects passage, it only notices change. What you experience as time is a reconstruction built after events occur. The mind compares states, notes differences, and stitches them together into a narrative of before and after. Without change, time disappears. This is why boredom feels endless and fear feels fast. Emotion alters memory, and memory is what time is made of. Your brain stores moments unevenly. Some seconds stretch because they are dense with sensation, while entire hours vanish because nothing distinct anchored them. When you later reflect, the density of memory becomes duration. Time is inferred, not perceived. This realization can feel destabilizing. If you don't experience time directly, then the present is thinner than it feels. You are always inside a moment with no length, surrounded by memory behind you and anticipation ahead. The sense of flow is added later, like subtitles placed over a silent film. The unsettling part is control. If time is constructed after the fact, then urgency, regret, and nostalgia are edits, not truths. You don't feel life passing. You realize it has passed only once, the moment is already gone, leaving behind a story your mind tells itself to make movement feel real, direction feel solid, and existence feel continuous instead of flickering, fragmented, and endlessly reset each time awareness blinks and the present quietly disappears. There are more possible human faces than people who have ever lived. There are more possible human faces than people who have ever lived, a fact that quietly dismantles the way you think about identity and familiarity. The human face feels common because you see them everywhere, every day, in endless repetition. Yet mathematically, the number of unique facial combinations is so vast that it exceeds the total number of humans who have ever existed on Earth. Most faces that could exist never will. This happens because faces are built from countless variables: bone structure, spacing, symmetry, skin texture, eye shape, micro-expressions, and subtle asymmetries combine in astronomical ways. Even identical twins who share nearly the same genetic blueprint are still distinguishable when looked at closely. The human face is not a template. It is a probability event, a rare alignment that will likely never repeat exactly. What makes this emotionally charged is how quickly faces feel familiar. Your brain is wired to recognize and categorize faces with extreme efficiency. It creates shortcuts, grouping strangers into impressions and assumptions. Yet behind that familiarity lies extreme rarity. Every face you pass on the street is statistically extraordinary, even if it feels ordinary. This realization reframes anonymity. You may feel replaceable, forgettable, or lost in crowds, but your face is a one-time occurrence in human history. No one before you had it. No one after you will have it in the same way. And yet, this uniqueness does not guarantee recognition or remembrance. Rarity does not equal significance in a world overwhelmed by numbers. There is something quietly tragic and beautiful in that tension. Faces capable of infinite variation move past one another every day, briefly intersecting, rarely truly seen. You carry a face that is mathematically improbable, biologically unrepeatable, and socially fleeting. This means identity is not scarcity. It is abundance compressed into moments. You are surrounded by once-in-existence faces, including your own, all trying to be noticed, understood, or remembered, even as time keeps moving forward, indifferent to how rare any of it truly is. Some people don't have an inner monologue. Some people don't have an inner monologue, and this fact quietly destabilizes how most people understand consciousness. If you hear a voice in your head narrating thoughts, replaying conversations, or commenting on your actions, it feels inseparable from being you. It feels like proof of awareness itself. Yet for some people, that voice is entirely absent. There is no internal narrator, no spoken thoughts echoing in silence, only images, feelings, or direct understanding without words. This does not mean their minds are empty. It means their thinking takes a different form. Thoughts arrive as concepts, emotions, or visual impressions rather than sentences. Decisions are made without verbal debate. Memories surface without internal storytelling. For those with an inner monologue, this can be almost impossible to imagine because language feels like the structure of thought rather than just one possible tool. What makes this emotionally unsettling is the implication that the voice you associate with you is not universal. It is not required for intelligence, creativity, or self-awareness. It is a cognitive style, not a defining feature of consciousness. This raises a quiet question. If the voice disappeared, would you still feel like yourself? The inner monologue often feels like control, but it is also a source of anxiety, rumination, and self-criticism. People without it may experience fewer looping thoughts, fewer internal arguments, and a different relationship with silence. Meanwhile, those with a constant internal voice may mistake that commentary for truth rather than interpretation. This realization can feel disorienting because it fractures the assumption that minds work the same way. Consciousness is not one format, it is many. and the way you experience being alive is not a baseline reality, but one version among countless others, shaped by how your brain learned to think without ever asking you which version you wanted. The brain can convince itself it's paralyzed. The brain can convince itself it's paralyzed even when the body is physically capable of moving. This is not metaphor or imagination. It is a documented neurological phenomenon where perception overrides reality. The brain, faced with conflicting signals or protective instincts, can decide that immobility is safer than motion and enforce that decision with terrifying certainty. What makes this deeply unsettling is how absolute it feels from the inside. When this occurs, the body doesn't feel weak or unresponsive. It feels absent. Commands to move never reach muscles because the brain never sends them. Conscious intention exists, but execution is blocked. The experience is often described as being trapped inside yourself, fully aware, fully present, and completely unable to act. This can happen during extreme fear, trauma, or conditions like sleep paralysis. In such states, the brain activates ancient survival circuits designed to freeze the body when escape seems impossible. From an evolutionary perspective, stillness can mean survival. From a human perspective, it feels like betrayal. The emotional weight comes from what this reveals about control. You trust your body because you trust your brain. When the brain becomes the barrier, that trust collapses. It exposes how thin the line is between agency and helplessness, how quickly certainty can dissolve into panic. More disturbingly, the brain doesn't distinguish between real and perceived threat in these moments. Belief becomes command. The idea of paralysis becomes paralysis. This means that freedom of movement, something that feels fundamental, is conditional. It exists only as long as the brain agrees to allow it, and that agreement can be withdrawn without warning, leaving awareness intact while power disappears. You've never seen darkness, only the absence of light. You've never seen darkness, only the absence of light, even though it feels like darkness is something tangible, heavy, and present. Your brain treats darkness as an object, a thing that fills space, but in reality there is nothing there to see. Vision depends entirely on light entering your eyes. When light disappears, perception doesn't switch to seeing darkness. It simply loses information. What you experience is not darkness itself, but your brain responding to missing data. This matters because your mind is deeply uncomfortable with absence. When information is missing, the brain doesn't leave a blank. It creates a sensation to represent that lack. Darkness feels like something pressing in because your brain interprets uncertainty as a signal. The unknown triggers alertness. Evolution wired you to treat low visibility as danger, not emptiness. So your nervous system fills the gap with tension, expectation, and imagined presence. Emotionally, this explains why darkness can feel unsettling even when you know you are safe. Your eyes are open, your brain is active, but there is nothing arriving to be processed. Instead of silence, your perception amplifies internal noise. Thoughts grow louder. Fear becomes easier to access. The absence of light removes external anchors, forcing your mind inward. This also reveals how perception is not passive. You don't simply receive the world, you interpret it. When light vanishes, your brain doesn't shut down. It stays alert, scanning for meaning that never arrives. The feeling of darkness is the feeling of anticipation without confirmation. What's unsettling is realizing that what you experience as darkness is not a property of the world at all. It is a psychological response to missing input. The world does not become dark. Your perception becomes incomplete. This means that much of what feels real is your brain reacting to absence rather than presence. Darkness is not something you see. It is something you feel when your mind is forced to confront the limits of its own perception, filling empty space with sensation, emotion, and imagined threat. simply because it cannot tolerate nothingness. Every mirror shows you a you that doesn't exist anymore. Every mirror shows you a you that doesn't exist anymore, even though it feels immediate and real. The image staring back at you is already outdated by the time you register it. Light takes time to travel, signals take time to process, and your brain takes additional time to assemble what you think you are seeing. The reflection feels like the present, but it is always a moment behind who you actually are. This delay is small, almost meaningless in daily life, but emotionally it carries weight. You look for yourself in mirrors to confirm identity, to ground who you are in something visible and stable. Yet the version you recognize is already gone. Even beyond the physical delay, your body is constantly changing. Cells are dying, being replaced, aging, adapting. The person in the mirror is a temporary arrangement that will never exist again in that exact form. What makes this unsettling is how much trust we place in reflections. We use them to decide how we feel about ourselves, how we are seen, how we measure change. But mirrors do not show continuity. They show fragments. Each glance captures a version of you frozen between moments, disconnected from the flow of becoming that defines your actual existence. Emotionally, this can create quiet tension. You may feel attached to an image that no longer matches how you feel inside, or you may chase a reflection that represents a past you that cannot return. The mirror becomes a place where time briefly pauses, while you do not. This realization reframes identity as something fluid rather than fixed. You are never fully visible to yourself. The self you recognize is always slightly behind, slightly incomplete, slightly imagined. And yet, you keep looking, not to see who you are, but to reassure yourself that there is still a version of you that feels familiar, even as it continuously slips away. You are always seeing the past, even by a fraction of a second. You are always seeing the past, even if only by a fraction of a second. This is not philosophy or poetic framing. It is a physical limitation of perception. Light takes time to travel, signals take time to process, and your brain takes time to assemble what you experience as now. By the time you become aware of a moment, it has already happened. What makes this unsettling is how convincing the illusion of immediacy feels. The world seems live, responsive, present. Yet every face you see, every movement you register, every word you read belongs to a moment that no longer exists. The present you believe you occupy is already slipping behind you, constantly replaced by newer fragments that arrive just late enough to feel current. Your brain hides this delay through prediction. It anticipates what should happen next and smooths perception, so reality feels continuous. When predictions fail, you notice the lag through surprise, shock, or confusion. These brief ruptures expose the truth. Perception is always catching up. Emotionally, this destabilizes the idea of control. You react to a world that is already gone. Decisions are made based on echoes. Even self-awareness trails behind experience, meaning you never fully inhabit the instant you think you do. The haunting implication is that the present moment is unreachable. You can aim for it, talk about it, meditate on it, but you cannot stand inside it. Consciousness lives in a thin buffer between what has already happened and what is being predicted next. You are never quite where you think you are, always a step behind reality, moving through time by following its fading after image, mistaking delay for presence because the brain edits the gap into something that feels like now.
Your name feels special because your brain reacts to it differently.
Your name feels special because your brain reacts to it differently, even when you are not consciously paying attention. Among all the sounds you hear every day, your name cuts through noise with unusual power. In a crowded room, across overlapping conversations, your brain can detect it instantly. This is not coincidence or ego. It is neurological priority. Your name is treated as a signal tied directly to survival, identity, and relevance. From early childhood, your name becomes one of the most repeated sounds in your life. It is paired with attention, praise, discipline, safety, and belonging. Over time, your brain wires it deeply into systems responsible for alertness and self-awareness. When your name is spoken, it activates areas associated with personal significance, even if you were daydreaming seconds before. Your brain checks in. Is this about me? This reaction creates an emotional shortcut. Hearing your name can produce warmth, anxiety, or anticipation, depending on context. It pulls you into the moment, anchoring you back into yourself. This is why seeing your name in writing or hearing it unexpectedly can feel intimate, invasive, or comforting. It bypasses logic and goes straight to relevance. What makes this unsettling is how automatic it is. You do not choose this reaction. Your brain elevates your name above almost everything else. Even in sleep, people can respond to hearing their name while ignoring other sounds. Identity is guarded at a subconscious level. This explains why names carry power. They can summon attention, command presence, or make someone feel seen. It also explains why mispronunciation or misuse can feel oddly personal. Your brain treats your name not as a label, but as an extension of you. In this way, your name is not just something you are called. It is a neurological trigger, a key that unlocks awareness, emotion, and selfhood instantly. Long before you decide to care, your brain already does, proving that identity is protected, reinforced, and constantly monitored beneath conscious thought. The universe is expanding faster than we can measure accurately. The universe is expanding faster than we can measure accurately, and this exposes a quiet failure at the edge of human understanding. We can see galaxies racing away from each other, space itself stretching in every direction. Yet when we try to calculate the exact speed of this expansion, our answers refuse to agree. Different methods give different results, and the gap between them will not close. The universe is doing something precise, but our measurements cannot catch up. This isn't a minor technical issue. It suggests that something fundamental about reality is slipping through our tools. We build instruments of staggering precision, peer billions of years into the past, and still arrive at conflicting truths. The more carefully we observe, the clearer it becomes that our models are incomplete. The universe is not obligated to align with our expectations of consistency. What makes this emotionally unsettling is the implication that uncertainty is baked into existence itself. Expansion defines the fate of everything: galaxies, stars, matter, and eventually time as we experience it. Yet we cannot pin down its pace. The future of the cosmos is accelerating away while we argue over decimals. Your mind craves stable numbers, clean answers, and reliable predictions. This expansion denies all three. It tells you that even at the grandest scale, reality resists being fully known. The universe is not just large, it is evasive. This creates a subtle existential pressure. You live inside something that is growing faster than your ability to understand it. The ground of reality itself is stretching, carrying everything with it, including you. And while the universe expands without hesitation, your certainty lags behind, forever trying to catch a moving target that refuses to slow down long enough to be fully understood. You can feel embarrassed even when alone. And this fact reveals something quietly unsettling about how deeply social your mind truly is. Embarrassment feels like a reaction to being seen, judged, or exposed, yet it does not require an audience. The brain is capable of recreating one internally, complete with imagined eyes, opinions, and verdicts. Even in silence, you are not psychologically alone. This happens because your sense of self is built through social feedback. Over time, the voices of others become internalized, forming an inner observer that monitors your behavior. When you replay an awkward memory or imagine how something would look to someone else, that internal observer activates. The emotion arrives even though no one is present. The brain reacts to perceived judgment, not actual witnesses. What makes this emotionally powerful is how involuntary it is. You don't choose to feel embarrassed in private. It emerges automatically, triggered by memory, imagination, or self-awareness. A thought crosses your mind, a past mistake resurfaces, and your body responds with heat, tension, and the urge to hide, even though there is nowhere to hide from yourself. This reveals how strongly the brain prioritizes belonging. Embarrassment evolved to protect social bonds, to prevent behaviors that might lead to rejection. Your brain treats imagined social threat almost as seriously as real ones. The possibility of judgment is enough. The unsettling implication is that privacy does not fully exist psychologically. You carry an internal audience everywhere. Your brain rehearses, critiques, and evaluates even in solitude, enforcing social rules long after others are gone. This can feel suffocating, but it also explains why humans reflect, grow, and self-correct. Embarrassment in solitude is the echo of connection, proof that your mind is wired not just to survive alone, but to belong, even when no one is watching and the room is completely empty. You don't remember falling asleep. Even though it happens to you every single day. One moment you are thinking, scrolling, replaying conversations, or planning tomorrow, and the next moment you are gone. There is no memory of the transition, no clear boundary. Consciousness does not fade gradually in recall. It simply disappears. The moment sleep begins is missing from your life entirely. This happens because sleep requires the shutdown of the very systems responsible for forming memories. As your brain drifts towards sleep, the networks that track time, store experience, and maintain self-awareness begin to disengage. The brain cannot record the moment it stops recording. Falling asleep erases itself by design. You are conscious right up until the instant you aren't, and that instant leaves no trace. Emotionally, this reveals how fragile awareness really is. You experience yourself as continuous, stable, present. Yet every night, your mind slips offline without your consent and without documentation. There is no sensation of crossing over, only an assumption afterward that it happened. You infer sleep by waking up, not by remembering entering it. This gap is unsettling because it means part of your life is unaccounted for. Hours pass without memory, without narrative, without identity. You trust that you were there, but you cannot prove it experientially. The self you identify with dissolves temporarily, then reassembles in the morning as if nothing happened. The brain does this to protect you. Consciousness is metabolically expensive. Sleep restores, reorganizes, and cleans neural connections. To do that, the observing self must step aside. Awareness cannot witness its own suspension. This means you surrender control every night. You let go of perception, thought, and memory without resistance because you cannot feel it happening. The last thing you ever remember before sleep is not falling asleep, but believing you are still awake. Every night, your consciousness quietly ends, and every morning it resumes without explanation. You live your life trusting a process you never experience, relying on a disappearance you can't remember, and waking up as if nothing extraordinary occurred at all. There are entire languages with no word for blue. And this quietly reshapes how you think about perception. To speakers of these languages, the sky is not blue in the way you experience it, nor is the ocean separated by a clean linguistic boundary from green or dark shades. This is not a failure of eyesight. It is a difference in how reality is categorized, remembered, and emotionally processed. Color feels objective, as if it exists independently of language, but your brain relies on words to stabilize perception. When a color has no name, it becomes harder to isolate, easier to blend into surrounding experience. People still see the wavelength, but they do not mentally carve it out as a distinct concept. Without a word, the color does not anchor itself in memory in the same way. This is emotionally unsettling because it reveals how much of what feels obvious is quietly taught. You trust your perception, but perception is shaped by the labels you inherit. Language doesn't just describe reality, it trains your attention. It tells you what deserves separation and what can remain vague. Blue feels fundamental to you because you were taught to notice it. The deeper implication is that reality is not shared evenly. Two people can look at the same world and genuinely experience it differently, not because one is wrong, but because their minds were structured differently from the beginning. Entire emotional associations tied to color, calmness, sadness, distance, or depth may not exist in the same way. This realization destabilizes certainty. It suggests that parts of reality become real only after being named. There may be distinctions you have never noticed simply because your language never pointed them out. The world you move through feels complete, but it is already missing things. Not because they aren't there, but because you were never taught how to see them.
Your gut makes about 90% of your serotonin.
Your gut makes about 90% of your serotonin, and this fact quietly overturns how you think emotions work. Serotonin is often described as the happiness chemical, something produced by the brain to regulate mood, calm, and well-being. But most of it is made far from conscious thought, deep in the digestive system, among nerves, microbes, and rhythmic contractions you never notice. This means your emotional baseline is not fully under your mental control. Signals rise from the gut to the brain, influencing how safe, motivated, or content you feel before you think a single thought. Mood does not always begin as a story in your head. It often starts as chemistry, timing, and balance below awareness. Emotionally, this can feel unsettling. It suggests that willpower alone cannot fix how you feel. You can reason, affirm, and reflect, yet your emotional state may already be set by systems you do not feel or see. Stress, diet, sleep, and bacteria quietly shift your internal chemistry, nudging mood long before thoughts arrive. The deeper implication is vulnerability. If emotion begins in the body, then care, nourishment, and rhythm matter as much as insight. Your feelings are not just reactions, they are signals from a hidden system constantly negotiating survival. You feel like a mind steering a body, but often you are listening to messages written in your gut, shaping your inner world before you ever realize the conversation has already started. And once you notice this, emotional certainty becomes fragile because control feels shared, negotiated, and human, not absolute, rational, or singular again. The brain burns calories just by thinking hard. The brain burns calories just by thinking hard, even though the body appears completely still. No muscles flex, no sweat forms, no visible effort is made, yet energy is being consumed at a steady rate. Thinking is physical labor. Neurons fire, electrical signals travel, chemicals are released and reabsorbed, and all of it requires fuel. The brain does not work for free. What makes this surprising is how effortless thinking feels. You can sit quietly, stare at nothing, and still be expending energy simply by concentrating, worrying, imagining, or solving a problem. The brain already consumes a large portion of your daily energy just to stay alert. When you think intensely, that demand increases. Focus has a metabolic cost, even if your body looks relaxed. Emotionally, this reframes mental exhaustion. Feeling drained after deep thinking is not weakness or imagination. It is fatigue. Your brain has been working, burning resources to maintain attention, suppress distractions, and hold complex ideas together. Mental strain leaves real traces, even if there are no sore muscles to prove it. This also explains why prolonged stress is so damaging. Constant overthinking forces the brain into sustained energy use without recovery. Worry, rumination, and hypervigilance keep neural circuits active longer than they are meant to be. Over time, this drains energy reserves and affects mood, memory, and resilience. The unsettling part is how invisible this labor is. Others can't see it. Sometimes even you dismiss it, but your brain knows. It responds by slowing down, seeking rest, or craving fuel. This is not laziness, it is biological negotiation. Thinking shapes your reality, but it also consumes you in small, measurable ways. Every decision, fear, or creative leap costs something. Your mind is not floating above your body. It is working inside it, constantly converting energy into thought, quietly burning calories while you sit still, proving that even silence can be exhausting when the brain refuses to stop working. You've probably dreamed of a face you've never seen in real life. You've probably dreamed of a face you've never seen in real life, and this quietly challenges how you understand imagination. Dreams feel like recycled reality, as if your mind can only rearrange what it has already encountered. Yet the brain is capable of generating faces that do not belong to any real person you have ever met, seen, or passed on the street. These faces can feel vivid, familiar, even emotionally significant, despite having no real-world origin. This happens because your brain does not store faces as photographs. It stores patterns, bone structure, spacing, symmetry, expressions, emotional cues. All of these are broken down and abstracted. When you dream, your mind recombines these fragments into new configurations, creating someone who feels real without ever having existed. The familiarity you feel is not recognition, it is coherence. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how convincing these dream people can be. You might feel trust, fear, attraction, or comfort toward a face that has no history. Your emotional brain responds as if the person is real, forming connections that dissolve when you wake. The bond felt genuine, even though the individual never existed outside your mind. This reveals something unsettling about human attachment. Your brain does not require reality to generate emotional meaning. It requires structure and pattern. If something fits well enough into your internal models of person, your nervous system responds automatically. The deeper discomfort comes from realizing that your mind can manufacture presence without permission. Someone can matter to you deeply for a moment and then vanish completely, leaving only a residue of feeling. Dreams expose how thin the boundary is between imagination and experience. Your brain is not limited to replaying life. It creates lifelike meaning from fragments, proving that reality is not the only place where emotions can form, attach, and feel real while they last. Humans can hallucinate from lack of sleep alone. Without drugs, illness, or external triggers. Simply removing sleep is enough to cause the brain to detach from reality. This happens because sleep is not rest in the casual sense. It is maintenance. When sleep is denied, the brain does not slow down gracefully. It begins to malfunction. As wakefulness stretches on, the boundary between perception and imagination weakens. The brain, deprived of recovery, starts misfiring signals. Shadows move when nothing is there. Sounds appear without a source. Thoughts fragment. Logic slips, and familiar surroundings begin to feel subtly unreal. These hallucinations are not symbolic or dreamlike. They feel immediate, convincing, and present. What makes this emotionally disturbing is how little it takes. You don't need weeks without sleep. In some cases, a single extended period of wakefulness is enough to trigger distortions. The brain becomes desperate for rest and starts intruding fragments of dreaming into waking life. Reality and dream content bleed together, not because of fantasy, but because the brain can no longer keep them separate. This exposes a fragile truth about sanity. Stability is not a fixed trait. It is a state actively maintained. Consciousness depends on cycles, not strength. When those cycles are disrupted, the mind does not defend reality at all costs. It abandons it. The unsettling implication is proximity. Hallucination is not a distant condition reserved for extremes. It is close, accessible, and human. Your grip on reality is conditional, dependent on something as ordinary as sleep. Remove it, and the mind begins to rewrite the world without asking permission. Sleep is not a luxury. It is the line that keeps imagination contained, perception grounded, and the world intact. Without it, the brain does not shut down. It opens doors that were never meant to be walked through while awake. Some memories feel vivid but are completely wrong. Some memories feel vivid but are completely wrong, and the confidence you feel in them is part of the illusion. Vividness does not equal accuracy. In fact, the more detailed a memory feels, the more likely it has been reconstructed, edited, and emotionally reinforced over time. Your brain uses clarity as a substitute for truth. If something feels sharp, colorful, and emotionally charged, your mind treats it as reliable, even when it isn't. This happens because memory is not playback. It is reconstruction. Each time you remember something, your brain is not retrieving a file. It is rebuilding a scene. Details are filled in using context, expectation, and emotion. If pieces are missing, the brain supplies them automatically. Once added, those details feel just as real as anything that actually happened. Emotion plays a dangerous role here. Strong feelings act like a highlighter, making memories feel important and undeniable. But emotion distorts as much as it preserves. Fear can exaggerate threat. Nostalgia can soften pain. Embarrassment can invent judgments that never occurred. Over time, the emotional version replaces the factual one, and repetition locks it in place. What makes this unsettling is how much identity relies on memory. You justify decisions, relationships, and beliefs based on what you think happened. When a memory feels vivid, questioning it feels like self-betrayal. The brain resists correction because certainty feels safer than ambiguity. This is why eyewitnesses can be confident and wrong, why siblings remember childhood differently, why arguments persist over events that clearly happened one way. Each brain protected coherence, not truth. The most disturbing part is invisibility. You cannot feel a memory changing. You feel certainty increasing. The sharper it becomes, the more convincing it feels, even as it drifts further from reality. This means parts of your past may be stories your brain told itself to make sense of emotion, not records of what occurred. You are not lying to yourself. Your mind is doing what it does best, preserving meaning even if accuracy has to be sacrificed. There's no proof time moves forward. It just behaves that way. There's no proof time moves forward. It simply behaves as if it does. And that distinction quietly undermines one of the most basic assumptions you live by. You feel time advancing because memories accumulate, bodies age, and causes appear to precede effects. But at a fundamental level, physics does not clearly distinguish past from future. Many of the equations that describe reality work just as well in reverse. The universe does not label a direction and call it forward. What you experience as the flow of time may be a consequence of entropy, the tendency for systems to move from order to disorder. Broken things don't reassemble, heat spreads instead of concentrating, and memories form only in one direction. This creates an arrow that feels undeniable, but this arrow is descriptive, not definitive. It explains behavior, not necessity. Time appears to move forward because the universe changes in a way that makes reversal statistically improbable, not because it is forbidden. This realization is emotionally destabilizing because it challenges the sense of inevitability you rely on. The future feels open, the past feels closed, and the present feels like a knife edge between them. Yet this structure may exist only because your mind is built to experience time this way. Memory records one direction. Anticipation points to another. Consciousness stitches them together and calls it flow. What's unsettling is that now may not be a moving point at all. It may be a constant slice you keep interpreting as motion. You don't feel time passing directly. You infer it by noticing change. Without change, time would become invisible. This reframes certainty. The forward march you trust may be an emergent illusion rather than a rule. You live as if time is carrying you somewhere, but it may simply be rearranging everything around you while your mind insists on calling that rearrangement a journey. You've never touched anything. Electrons repel before contact. You've never touched anything. Electrons repel before contact. What feels like touch is actually a force field standoff at the smallest scale. When your hand presses against a surface, the atoms in your skin never meet the atoms in the object. Instead, their electrons repel each other, creating resistance your brain interprets as solidity. Contact is an illusion created by invisible forces doing their job too well to notice. This reframes how physical reality feels. The warmth of a cup, the pressure of a handshake, the comfort of a hug, all of it is mediated by electromagnetic repulsion. Your senses translate resistance into certainty. The brain tells a story of contact because it needs one. Without that story, the world would feel unreliable, unstable, and dangerous. Emotionally, this is disorienting because touch feels intimate and undeniable. It anchors you. It reassures you that the world is real and that you are part of it. Learning that touch never truly occurs introduces distance where closeness once lived. Even the most personal physical moments are interactions across a microscopic gap that never closes. Yet this gap is also protective. If atoms actually touched, matter would collapse. The same forces that keep you from truly touching anything also keep you intact. Boundaries are not failures of connection. They are what allow connection to exist safely. The deeper implication is subtle. If even touch is mediated, then certainty itself is constructed. You don't experience the world directly. You experience translations designed to keep you alive. Reality reaches you filtered, buffered, and softened by physics and biology working together. You feel grounded because the illusion is consistent, not because it is literal. The universe holds you at arm's length, always close enough to feel real, never close enough to merge. And your brain, grateful for the stability, calls that distance contact and lets you believe you've been touching the world all along. Your heartbeat slightly changes how you see the world. Your heartbeat slightly changes how you see the world, even though you are never aware of it happening. Each beat of your heart subtly alters blood pressure, oxygen flow, and neural sensitivity in your brain. These microscopic changes influence how intensely you perceive sights, sounds, and threats. Reality does not arrive in a steady stream. It pulses with your body. Between heartbeats, your brain is more sensitive. During a beat, it briefly dampens incoming signals to reduce internal noise. This means perception rises and falls in rhythm with your pulse. Fear, surprise, and attention can shift depending on whether a stimulus arrives at the peak or the pause of a heartbeat. You are not just reacting to the world. Your body is timing how clearly the world is allowed in. Emotion amplifies this effect. When your heart rate increases due to stress, excitement, or anxiety, perception changes more dramatically. Threats feel closer, sounds feel sharper, faces feel more intense. This is not imagination. Your nervous system is preparing you for action by adjusting perception itself. The world literally feels different because your heart is beating differently. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how little control you have over it. You believe you see the world objectively, consistently, moment to moment. In reality, your perception is synchronized with a biological rhythm you cannot pause. Two people can witness the same event and experience it differently simply because their hearts were doing different things at that instant. This also explains why fear can feel overwhelming and calm can feel expansive. A slower, steadier heartbeat allows perception to widen. A rapid heartbeat narrows it. Your body decides what matters before your thoughts catch up. The unsettling truth is that perception is not just shaped by the brain, but by the heart working beneath it. Your experience of reality is partially written in pulses, beats, and rhythms you never consciously hear, quietly influencing how safe, intense, or threatening the world feels from one second to the next. There are people alive right now who will never experience silence. There are people alive right now who will never experience silence, not because the world is too loud, but because their own perception never turns off. Even in the quietest room, even in the deepest night, there is always something there. A ringing, a buzzing, a hiss, a low hum that has no external source and no off switch. Silence, as a concept, exists for them only as an idea. This happens when the brain generates sound without sound waves. The ears may be damaged, overstimulated, or altered, but the deeper cause lives in the nervous system. When sensory input is lost or distorted, the brain fills the gap. It creates noise rather than tolerate emptiness. What feels like silence to others becomes an unbearable void to the brain, and so it speaks to itself instead. The emotional weight of this is heavy. Silence is not just the absence of sound, it is rest. It is where thoughts slow down, where emotions settle, where sleep feels safe. For someone who cannot access silence, there is no true pause. Every moment carries an undercurrent of intrusion, a reminder that the mind can become its own source of disturbance. What makes this unsettling is how invisible it is. From the outside, everything looks calm. From the inside, there is constant presence, a sound no one else can hear, validate, or remove. The isolation is not only auditory, but emotional. This reality exposes a deeper truth about perception. Experience is not shared equally. What feels universal is often personal. Silence feels like a default state until you realize it is a privilege, one that can disappear without warning. For those who live without silence, the world never fully powers down. And the most haunting part is that the noise is not coming from outside. It is coming from the same place where peace is supposed to live. You can't imagine a new color. You can't imagine a new color, no matter how creative or intelligent you are. This limitation is not about effort or imagination. It is structural. Your brain can only work with the raw materials it already has. Every color you have ever seen, dreamed of, or pictured exists because your visual system has been exposed to a specific range of light and learned how to translate it. Outside that range, imagination stops. Your eyes contain receptors tuned to certain wavelengths. Your brain learned early in life how to convert those signals into experiences like red, blue, or green. When you try to imagine a new color, what you actually do is remix existing ones. You blend, brighten, darken, or shift, but you never create something truly unfamiliar. The palette is closed. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how imagination feels infinite. You can imagine impossible worlds, creatures that don't exist, and futures you've never lived. Yet when it comes to something as basic as color, your mind hits a hard boundary. There are colors that exist in theory, outside human perception, that you will never know, not because they're hidden, but because your brain lacks the equipment to experience them. This reveals something quiet and humbling. Your reality is not limited by the universe alone, but by the interface through which you access it. The world may contain experiences richer, stranger, and more vivid than anything you've ever felt, and you pass through it blind to them without knowing what you're missing. The deeper implication is about knowledge itself. You can't miss what you can't imagine. Your brain protects you from that absence by making your world feel complete. But completeness is an illusion built from constraints. You don't see everything. You see what your mind is capable of constructing. Beyond that boundary is not darkness or mystery you can sense, but entire dimensions of experience you cannot even begin to picture because imagination itself is bound by biology, quietly enclosing your universe while convincing you it is whole.
The brain can replay pain without injury.
The brain can replay pain without injury, recreating suffering long after the body is safe. No wound is reopened, no damage occurs, yet the sensation feels real, immediate, and intrusive. This happens because pain does not live in the body. It lives in the brain. The body sends signals, but the brain decides when pain exists and how intense it should be. When you experience pain, the brain learns it. Neural pathways form around the sensation, linking it to emotion, memory, and context. If those pathways are reactivated later, the brain can reproduce the experience without any physical trigger. This is why phantom limb pain exists, why old injuries can ache without cause, and why trauma can make the body react as if danger has returned. Emotion strengthens this replay. Fear, stress, and memory act as amplifiers, convincing the brain that pain is useful again. The brain's priority is protection, not accuracy. If it believes pain might prevent future harm, it will generate it preemptively. To the brain, false pain is safer than missing a real threat. This becomes emotionally exhausting because it removes the sense of closure. Healing the body does not guarantee relief. The mind can reopen sensations that feel sealed. Pain becomes something you remember with your nervous system, not just your thoughts. What makes this unsettling is the lack of control. You cannot reason pain away. Logic does not silence neural circuits once they are activated. The brain responds faster than conscious thought, replaying sensations before you can intervene. This reveals a harsh truth about suffering. Pain is not always a message from the present. Sometimes it is an echo from the past, replayed because your brain has not decided it is safe to let go. The injury may be gone, but the lesson remains, etched into neural pathways designed to protect you at any cost. Your mind can hurt you without touching you, and because the pain feels real, your body reacts as if it is. Muscles tense, breath shortens, fear rises. The experience proves that pain does not require damage, only memory and belief, making the brain both a protector and, at times, the source of its own suffering. There are more possible games of checkers than atoms in the universe. There are more possible games of checkers than atoms in the universe, and this fact quietly reframes how you think about complexity. Checkers feel simple. The board is small, the rules are few, and the pieces are identical. It looks finite, solvable, almost trivial. Yet when every possible legal move sequence is accounted for, the number of unique games explodes beyond anything the physical universe can contain. This happens because possibility compounds faster than intuition allows. Each move branches into more moves, each decision spawning futures that multiply rather than add. What begins as a modest system quickly becomes unmanageable, not because it is chaotic, but because it is structured. Order, when repeated enough times, creates immensity. The emotional weight of this realization lies in contrast. You can hold a checkerboard in your hands, yet its potential exceeds the number of atoms that make up stars, planets, and everything you have ever touched. Something that fits on a table contains more futures than the universe contains matter. That imbalance feels almost wrong, as if abstraction has outgrown reality. This exposes a deeper truth about the limits of understanding. Not everything vast is physically large. Some of the biggest things that exist are invisible, existing only as potential, never fully realized. Most possible games of checkers will never be played. They exist only as mathematical ghosts, permitted by rules but denied by time. The unsettling implication is that reality constantly chooses from an ocean of unrealized outcomes. At every moment, countless alternatives are discarded without ceremony. Your life, like the game, follows one narrow path through a space of near infinite possibilities. This makes existence feel fragile and precise. The fact that anything happens at all in one specific way rather than another begins to feel improbable. You are not just living in a universe made of atoms. You are living inside a system where possibility vastly outweighs reality, and most of what could exist never gets the chance to become real. You forget about 90% of your dreams forever. You forget about 90% of your dreams forever, often within minutes of waking, and this loss happens without resistance or grief. Dreams feel vivid, emotional, sometimes overwhelming while they occur, yet they dissolve almost instantly, leaving behind only fragments or a vague emotional residue. Your brain does not treat dreams as things to be preserved. It treats them as temporary constructions, meant to be used and then erased. This forgetting is not accidental. During dreaming, especially in REM sleep, the brain intentionally suppresses the systems responsible for long-term memory storage. The dream is allowed to exist, but not to stay. It plays out intensely, then vanishes like a message written in water. You wake up with the feeling that something important just slipped away, because it did. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how personal dreams feel. They borrow familiar faces, places, fears, and desires, rearranging them into stories that feel deeply yours. And yet, the mind discards them without hesitation. Entire emotional experiences are lived and then deleted, as if they never mattered. This reveals something uncomfortable about consciousness. Meaning alone is not enough to guarantee memory. Relevance decides survival. The brain filters relentlessly, even turning away from experiences that felt profound moments earlier. Dreams are processed, not cherished. The deeper implication is about how much of your inner life disappears without record. Night after night, your mind creates worlds, resolves tensions, rehearses fears, and explores possibilities, then wipes the slate clean. You live entire narratives you will never recall, emotions you will never revisit, insights you will never consciously know you had. You wake believing you remember most of yourself, but vast portions of your experience never make it across the threshold into waking identity. They vanish quietly, leaving you with the illusion of continuity, while most of what your mind creates is lost forever. Not because it lacked meaning, but because your brain decided you didn't need to carry it with you into the day. Your brain reacts to fictional characters like real people. Your brain reacts to fictional characters like real people, even though you know they don't exist. When you watch a film, read a book, or follow a series, your brain does not fully distinguish between a real human and a well-crafted fictional one. The same neural networks involved in empathy, attachment, and social understanding activate as if you were interacting with an actual person. This happens because the brain evolved to respond to social cues, not to verify reality. Facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, and emotional context are enough to trigger connection. When a character shows fear, love, or vulnerability, your brain mirrors those states automatically. Logic may tell you it's fiction, but emotion doesn't wait for confirmation. It responds first. Over time, repeated exposure deepens this bond. You learn a character's personality, anticipate their reactions, and care about their outcomes. Your brain tracks them the same way it tracks friends, storing emotional associations and expectations. This is why character deaths can feel genuinely painful and why endings can leave a sense of loss. The social bond was real, even if the person was not. What makes this emotionally powerful is that the brain treats attention as investment. Time spent with a character signals importance. The brain assumes relevance and allocates emotional resources accordingly. It does not label the attachment as fictional. It simply experiences it. This reveals something unsettling about human connection. Attachment is not reserved for real relationships. It is triggered by perceived minds. If something feels conscious, intentional, and emotionally expressive, your brain opens the door. This also explains why stories shape beliefs, values, and identity. Fiction can influence you as deeply as lived experience because, neurologically, parts of your brain treat it that way. You are not weak for caring about fictional people. You are human. Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do: connect, empathize, and feel. The characters may vanish when the story ends, but the emotional traces they leave behind are real, stored alongside memories of people who actually exist. You can miss someone without knowing who. You can miss someone without knowing who, and this feeling can be more unsettling than missing a specific person. It arrives as a quiet ache with no clear source, a sense of absence that refuses to attach itself to a name, face, or memory. You feel the pull of loss without being able to explain what was lost, which makes the emotion harder to resolve or release. This happens because the brain is capable of longing without a target. Humans are wired for connection, attachment, and belonging, and sometimes the need itself becomes louder than any individual relationship. Your mind recognizes the shape of connection even when it cannot identify its origin. What you feel is not nostalgia for a person, but for a state of being: closeness, understanding, safety, or recognition. Emotionally, this is disorienting. Grief usually comes with an object, someone to point to and say, "This is why I hurt." But this kind of missing has no address. It can surface during quiet moments, late at night, or in crowds where you feel strangely detached. The absence feels real, yet undefined, which makes it easy to dismiss and impossible to satisfy. Your brain may be reacting to patterns rather than individuals, a tone of voice, a way of being seen, a version of yourself that only existed around certain people or times. When that pattern disappears, the mind registers loss even if the conscious memory has faded or was never clear to begin with. This reveals something uncomfortable about emotional memory. Not all bonds are stored as stories. Some are stored as sensations. When those sensations vanish, the longing remains without context. You are left missing something that cannot be retrieved because it was never fully formed into words. The unsettling truth is that not all loss is tied to people you remember. Some losses belong to possibilities, moments, or connections that never fully arrived, yet your nervous system learned to want them anyway. There are places where sound bends. Curves, and behaves in ways that feel impossible if you trust intuition alone. Sound is not a straight line traveler. It is a wave shaped by temperature, pressure, wind, and terrain. Under certain conditions, it can arc around obstacles, travel farther than expected, or vanish entirely where it should be loud. Reality does not always deliver sound where you think it should go. This happens because sound moves through air that is never uniform. Layers of warm and cool air can refract sound waves, causing them to curve upward or downward like light through water. Wind can stretch sound forward or fold it back on itself. In some environments, voices carry unnaturally far. In others, nearby noises disappear as if swallowed. The physics are precise, but the experience feels eerie. Emotionally, this is unsettling because sound is tied to certainty. Hearing something feels like proof. It confirms presence, distance, and danger. When sound bends, that trust collapses. You might hear footsteps where no one is, or fail to hear something directly beside you. The world stops lining up with expectation. Historically, this has shaped fear, myth, and survival. Battles were misjudged, warnings were missed, whispers traveled across valleys while shouts fell silent. The environment decided what could be heard, regardless of intent. Sound did not serve truth, it served physics. The deeper implication is about perception itself. You assume your senses report reality faithfully, but they obey conditions you do not feel. Sound does not promise honesty. It adapts, distorts, and redirects without concern for meaning. This means silence can lie and noise can mislead. What you hear is not what exists, but what arrives. The world speaks unevenly, bending its voice around invisible rules, and your brain fills uncertainty where none is guaranteed. You walk through spaces where reality is audible only on its own terms, trusting ears that cannot tell you when the message itself has been curved. You've likely already met someone who thought about you years later. Even if you never thought about them again. A brief conversation, a shared moment, a look held a second too long, or a kindness offered without intention can embed itself quietly in another person's memory. While you moved on, their mind kept a version of you alive, resurfacing unexpectedly across time. This happens because memory is not democratic. The moments that stay are not always the biggest or most dramatic. Sometimes they are small interactions that arrive at the right emotional moment. Your presence may have coincided with someone's vulnerability, transition, or loneliness. The brain tags experiences based on emotional relevance, not duration. 10 minutes with you could outweigh years with someone else. What makes this emotionally charged is asymmetry. You don't get notified when you matter. You don't feel the echo when someone remembers you during a quiet night, a difficult decision, or a moment of nostalgia. Their memory of you lives entirely outside your awareness. You continue your life unaware that you became part of someone else's inner landscape. The brain often returns to people who symbolize possibility, comfort, or a version of the self that no longer exists. You may represent who they were at that time, not just who you are. Remembering you becomes a way of remembering themselves. Your face, voice, or words become emotional shortcuts. This is unsettling because it disrupts the idea that impact requires intention. You may feel forgettable, interchangeable, unnoticed. Yet memory does not follow fairness. It follows feeling. You may be vivid in someone else's mind without ever knowing it. There is something quietly powerful in this. You are not only who you remember being, you are also who you were to others in moments you never revisited. Versions of you exist in minds you will never enter again, thinking about you years later, not because you tried to matter, but because, without realizing it, you already did. Some people can smell diseases, and this fact quietly blurs the line between instinct and science. To them, illness has a scent long before it has a diagnosis. Certain conditions change the body's chemistry, releasing subtle compounds through breath, skin, or sweat. Most people never notice. A few do, sensing something off without knowing why, registering sickness before machines confirm it. This ability isn't mystical, but it feels unsettling because it bypasses logic. Smell is the most primal sense, wired directly to the emotional and memory centers of the brain. When someone detects disease by scent, their awareness operates below conscious reasoning. They don't analyze symptoms. They react. Their body knows before their mind does. What makes this emotionally striking is how intimate it is. Disease announces itself quietly through the body's most private signals, a scent you can't name, a wrongness in the air around a person you love. For those who have this sensitivity, diagnosis can feel inevitable, even frightening. Imagine knowing something is wrong before anyone else believes you, carrying certainty without proof. This reveals a deeper truth about perception. Modern life teaches you to trust instruments, tests, and data, yet the human body still holds ancient detection systems that technology is only beginning to validate. Some noses outperform machines because they evolved for survival, not precision. The unsettling implication is how much information your senses might already be receiving without your awareness. Your body is constantly reading chemical signals, moods, and health cues, filtering most of them out so you can function. A few people simply receive less filtering. This ability also carries emotional weight. Smelling illness means encountering vulnerability before words exist for it. It means sensing mortality early, quietly, and often alone. The body speaks first. Medicine follows later. And in between, there is a moment where truth exists without confirmation, carried only by someone who can smell what others cannot yet see.
Your shadow is technically a hole in light.
Your shadow is technically a hole in light, not a thing in itself, but an absence shaped like you. Light does not create the shadow. Your body interrupts it. Where photons should land, they are blocked, and that missing information becomes visible as darkness. A shadow is not an object following you. It is evidence that something failed to arrive. What makes this emotionally strange is how personal shadows feel. They cling to you, stretch with you, distort with you, yet they have no substance, no mass, no loyalty. The moment the light source shifts, the shadow reshapes or disappears entirely. It feels like a companion, but it is really a void that only exists because light is present somewhere else. Your brain treats shadows as real because it must. They signal depth, distance, danger, and form. Without shadows, the world would flatten into confusion. So your mind assigns meaning to absence, turning missing light into information you can trust. Darkness becomes useful. There is something unsettling in realizing that what looks like presence is actually lack. Your outline and shadow is defined not by what you are, but by what you prevent. You are visible through what you deny the world behind you. This flips intuition. Identity feels like substance, yet here it is revealed through subtraction. The deeper implication reaches beyond physics. Much of what you notice in life is defined by absence, silence between sounds, space between objects, loss between memories. Your mind is skilled at turning gaps into meaning. A shadow is proof of that skill, a reminder that perception does not require material to feel real. You move through light, constantly creating holes without effort, leaving temporary voids shaped exactly like you. They follow, distort, vanish, and return, never touching you, never staying, always proving that even nothingness can feel intimate when the brain gives it form. You don't control most of your thoughts. You don't control most of your thoughts, even though it feels like you do. Thoughts appear fully formed, uninvited, and already in motion before you can approve or reject them. You notice them only after they arrive. The sense of control comes from responding to thoughts, not from creating them. Your mind generates ideas the way your heart generates beats, automatically, constantly, and without asking. This happens because the brain is a prediction engine, not a command center. It scans memory, emotion, habit, and environment, then produces thoughts it believes will be useful, protective, or relevant. Fear-based thoughts surface to prevent danger. Repetitive thoughts surface because the brain mistakes familiarity for importance. Random thoughts surface because the brain never truly goes idle. Emotion plays a major role in this process. Thoughts tied to anxiety, desire, shame, or curiosity are given priority. The brain assumes that emotional intensity equals urgency. This is why unwanted thoughts feel loud and persistent. They are not chosen, they are flagged. The brain is trying to solve something, even if the solution is unnecessary or harmful. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how personal thoughts feel. You identify with them. You judge yourself by them. When a disturbing or irrational thought appears, it feels like a reflection of who you are. In reality, it is often a byproduct of neural patterning, memory residue, or stress response. The thought arrived because it could, not because it defines you. This explains why trying to suppress thoughts often backfires. Resistance signals importance. The brain responds by repeating the thought more frequently. Attention feeds it. Awareness does not. The quiet truth is that you are not the author of most thoughts. You are the witness. Control begins not with choosing what appears, but with choosing what you believe, what you follow, and what you let pass. Your mind is loud, fast, and imperfect, but you are not your thoughts. You are the space that notices them, the pause that can exist between one thought and the next, even if only briefly. Music can trigger memories stronger than photographs. Music can trigger memories stronger than photographs, and this happens because sound reaches places images never fully touch. When you hear a song tied to a moment in your life, your brain does not just recall the event, it reactivates it. Heart rate shifts, emotions resurface, and your body responds as if part of that moment is happening again. A photograph shows you what was. Music makes you feel where you were. This is because music bypasses rational processing and moves directly into emotional and memory centers of the brain. Unlike images, which you consciously interpret, music arrives already loaded with feeling. Rhythm, melody, and harmony mirror internal states. When a song plays, your nervous system doesn't analyze first. It reacts. That reaction pulls memory with it. What makes this emotionally intense is how involuntary it is. You can look at an old photo and feel detached, even distant. But a song can collapse time instantly. Suddenly, you are back in a car, a bedroom, a season of your life you thought was gone. The emotions return before you have time to prepare for them. Longing, joy, grief, or warmth rise without warning. Music binds memory to feeling instead of detail. You may not remember exact conversations or faces, but the emotional atmosphere remains intact. That atmosphere is what your brain stores most deeply. Music acts as a key, unlocking it with frightening accuracy. This reveals something unsettling about how memory works. You do not remember your life as a clean timeline. You remember it as emotional states waiting for triggers. Music accesses those states directly, without asking permission. The power of this lies in how deeply human it is. Before language, before images, there was rhythm and sound. Music taps into something ancient, something wired into survival and bonding. That is why a song can hurt, heal, or haunt you more than anything you can see. It doesn't remind you of who you were. It briefly turns you back into that person again. You've never seen your own eyes directly. You've never seen your own eyes directly, not once in your entire life. Every version of your eyes you believe you know comes from reflections, photographs, or recordings, interpretations layered through glass, screens, and light. The one part of your face most associated with identity, emotion, and recognition is permanently unavailable to direct experience. This feels strange because eyes feel central to who you are. They express fear, joy, exhaustion, love. They are how others recognize you and how you recognize them. And yet, your own eyes exist outside your perception. You can feel them move, strain, water, or burn, but you cannot see them as they are in real time. There is no first-person access. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how trust is involved. You trust mirrors to tell the truth, even though they reverse you. You trust photos, even though they freeze moments that no longer exist. The image you hold of yourself is always delayed, mediated, and slightly wrong. You build self-image from secondhand evidence. This creates a quiet distance between who you are and who you believe yourself to be. Others have direct access to something you never will. They see your eyes respond instantly, without reflection or filter, while you must rely on memory and imagination. Your most expressive feature belongs more to the world than to you. The deeper implication is about self-knowledge. If you cannot see your own eyes, then self-perception is never complete. You experience yourself indirectly through feedback, reactions, and interpretations. Identity becomes something assembled rather than observed. You move through life seeing everything except the instruments doing the seeing. Your eyes open the world to you while remaining hidden, shaping every experience without ever becoming one. And in that gap between observer and observed, the sense of self quietly forms, built around something you can never fully witness, yet trust completely. There are thoughts your brain blocks you from thinking. Not because they are impossible, but because they are threatening. Your mind is not an open field where every idea is allowed to roam freely. It is a guarded system, constantly filtering, suppressing, and redirecting certain lines of thought before they ever reach conscious awareness. You don't notice what never arrives. This happens because the brain's primary job is not truth or insight. It is stability. Some thoughts destabilize identity, overwhelm emotion, or threaten the sense of control that allows you to function. When a thought risks unraveling coherence, the brain intervenes. It redirects attention, creates distraction, or replaces the thought with something safer. You feel this as avoidance, confusion, or a sudden mental blank. These blocked thoughts often orbit existential fear, identity collapse, forbidden impulses, or unbearable uncertainty. The brain recognizes that fully engaging with them could trigger panic, paralysis, or emotional overload, so it acts preemptively. The thought never fully forms. You feel the edge of it, then it disappears, leaving behind unease without explanation. Emotionally, this is unsettling because it means self-knowledge has limits enforced from within. You believe you have access to your own mind, yet parts of it are restricted, not by society or morality alone, but by internal defense mechanisms shaped through evolution and experience. Your brain decides what you are ready to face. This explains why some realizations arrive only during moments of extreme stress, deep reflection, or altered states. When the usual filters weaken, suppressed thoughts can surface suddenly and feel overwhelming or revelatory. It's not that the thoughts are new, they were always there, just inaccessible. The quiet implication is that consciousness is curated. What you experience as your thoughts is a selected stream, not the full inventory. Your brain protects you from ideas that could dismantle meaning faster than you could rebuild it. You are not hiding from certain thoughts. Your mind is hiding them from you, and it does so not out of deception, but out of survival, choosing stability over total awareness every time. The brain predicts your next word before you say it. Quietly deciding what you are about to express before you become aware of the decision yourself. Speech feels spontaneous, as if words rise naturally in the moment, but behind that feeling is a rapid predictive system working ahead of consciousness. Your brain is constantly simulating what you are likely to say next, narrowing possibilities and preparing outcomes milliseconds before sound leaves your mouth. This prediction happens so fast that it feels invisible. As you speak, your brain is already preparing the following word, adjusting based on context, emotion, social cues, and past patterns. If someone interrupts you, you often know exactly what you were about to say, not because you paused, but because the word was already formed internally. Language is less about creation and more about release. What makes this emotionally unsettling is the implication for free will. You experience speech as intentional, yet the decision arrives before awareness does. Your conscious mind often receives the word after the brain has already committed to it. You don't choose words from nothing. You approve what your brain has already prepared. This predictive process is essential. Without it, conversation would collapse into hesitation. Speech would be slow, fragmented, and exhausting. Prediction allows fluency, humor, timing, and emotional nuance. It keeps interaction smooth by hiding the machinery underneath. But that same machinery also explains why you sometimes say things you didn't mean to say or words that surprise you. The brain predicts efficiently, not ethically. It prioritizes speed over reflection. Once a word is released, it becomes reality, even if your conscious self arrives late to the decision. This creates a subtle tension between who you think is speaking and what is actually happening. You feel like the author of your words, yet much of authorship happens below awareness. Your brain is always a step ahead of you, writing drafts you only notice once they are already spoken aloud. You can feel nostalgia for things you never lived through. And this emotion can feel just as real, heavy, and intimate as memories from your own past. You might long for an era you were never born into, a place you've never visited, or a version of life that never actually existed. The feeling arrives fully formed, carrying warmth, sadness, and a strange sense of loss for something you never had. This happens because nostalgia is not tied strictly to memory. It is tied to meaning. Your brain is capable of constructing emotional memories from stories, images, music, and imagination. When you hear about a time described as simpler, freer, or more human, your mind fills in the gaps. It creates scenes, moods, and identities that feel emotionally familiar, even without personal experience. Emotionally, this can be disorienting. You grieve something you cannot point to. The longing feels directionless, like homesickness without a home. Your brain responds not to what was, but to what feels missing now. Nostalgia becomes a mirror, reflecting dissatisfaction with the present rather than attachment to the past. This reveals something important about human emotion. Feelings do not require factual grounding to feel true. The brain uses imagination to process unmet needs, unresolved desires, and identity questions. A past you never lived becomes a symbolic container for those emotions. The unsettling implication is that longing is not always about memory. Sometimes it is about possibility. You are not missing a time. You are missing a feeling you believe existed somewhere else. The brain reaches backward into imagined history to cope with uncertainty now. This kind of nostalgia can be comforting, but it can also quietly trap you. It suggests fulfillment exists elsewhere, in another time, another version of life. And because that place was never real, it can never disappoint you, making the present feel thinner by comparison. You mourn what never happened because the brain is capable of loving ideas as deeply as experiences. In that space between imagination and emotion, nostalgia becomes less about the past and more about the ache to belong to a story that feels complete, even if it was never yours to live. You've survived every worst day of your life so far. Even the ones that once felt unsurvivable. At the time, some days did not feel like obstacles to overcome but like endings. Moments where the future collapsed, where fear drowned logic, where pain felt permanent and relief unimaginable. Yet those days are behind you now, not erased, not meaningless, but endured. This fact matters because the brain is terrible at forecasting resilience. When you are in distress, your mind narrows time. Pain convinces you it will last forever. Anxiety stretches the present until it feels endless. In those moments, your brain cannot imagine a version of you that has already survived. It treats the current state as the final one. That is why suffering feels absolute while it is happening. Survival often doesn't look heroic. It looks like getting through the next hour. It looks like dissociating, numbing, crying, or simply continuing to exist. Your brain switches into preservation mode, lowering expectations, conserving energy, and keeping you alive even when meaning feels inaccessible. You don't conquer the day, you outlast it. What makes this emotionally heavy is that survival doesn't erase damage. You carry echoes. Your nervous system remembers what your mind would rather forget, but survival rewires you anyway. Each endured worst day quietly recalibrates what you are capable of withstanding. Strength forms without asking permission. This realization can feel bittersweet. You wish you hadn't needed to be strong. You wish the proof wasn't required. Yet it exists. Your history contains evidence you rarely acknowledge. You are still here. Not because it was easy, not because you knew how, but because something in you kept going when stopping felt justified. Every worst day you feared would destroy, you failed to do so. And tomorrow, even without guarantees, that same quiet mechanism is still there, ready to carry you through moments you cannot yet imagine surviving, even when you don't believe you will. The universe doesn't care if it makes sense. The universe doesn't care if it makes sense, and this quietly clashes with the way your mind is built. Humans are meaning-making creatures. You instinctively search for patterns, causes, and explanations, assuming that if something exists, it must be understandable. But the universe was not shaped to be comforting or coherent to human thought. It operates according to rules that work, not rules that explain themselves. At fundamental levels, reality behaves in ways that resist intuition. Particles act like waves, time stretches and bends, and cause and effect can blur under extreme conditions. These are not puzzles waiting to be solved for emotional satisfaction. They are behaviors that simply occur. When they stop aligning with common sense, the universe does not correct itself. It continues, indifferent to confusion. What makes this emotionally unsettling is the mismatch between expectation and reality. You want the world to justify itself, to feel fair, logical, or narratively clean. But the universe offers no reassurance. It does not slow down to clarify. It does not apologize for contradiction. Meaning is something observers project, not something reality guarantees. This realization destabilizes certainty. It suggests that understanding is optional, not required for existence. Things can be true without being intuitive. Events can unfold without offering reasons that feel emotionally satisfying. The universe functions without concern for whether anyone comprehends it. Your discomfort comes from realizing that clarity is a human need, not a cosmic one. You live inside a system that predates explanation and will outlast it. When something fails to make sense, it is not broken. It is simply unconcerned. This forces a quiet shift in perspective. You can seek understanding, build models, and tell stories that help you cope, but those stories are for you. The universe does not check them for accuracy in terms of comfort. It only checks whether they work well enough to predict what happens next. Everything else is optional, including your sense of meaning.
Your perception of now lasts about 3 seconds.
Your perception of now lasts about 3 seconds, and everything you experience as the present is built inside that narrow window. The moment you believe you are living in is not a sharp point in time, but a soft interval your brain stitches together to feel continuous. Now is not instantaneous, it is buffered. Your brain collects sensory input, holds it briefly, and blends it with the immediate past to create something stable enough to feel real. Without this buffering, reality would feel fragmented, flickering, and impossible to follow. Sounds would not form words, movements would not feel smooth, consciousness would shatter into unrelated frames. The 3-second window is what prevents that collapse. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how it reframes presence. You think you are fully in the moment, but you are always slightly late and slightly extended. The present you feel already includes memory. By the time you notice something, your brain has already grouped it, smoothed it, and decided it belongs to now. This explains why time distorts under emotion. Fear, awe, or shock stretch the window, packing it with detail. Routine compresses it, making hours vanish. Time does not change. The brain's construction of now does. Duration becomes psychological, not objective. The deeper implication is about control and awareness. You never experience reality raw. You experience a curated slice designed for survival, not truth. The present moment feels solid because your brain makes it so, not because it is. When people say be present, they imagine a still point you can step into, but that point doesn't exist. Presence is always an overlap, a blend of what just happened and what is being predicted next. You live inside a moving bubble of awareness, about 3 seconds wide, constantly renewing, constantly dissolving. The unsettling part is that life doesn't pass in moments. It passes in these overlapping constructions. You don't step through time cleanly. You surf it on a delay, mistaking the brain's buffer for reality itself, calling it now because anything thinner would be impossible to live inside. Some people see time spatially. Meaning time does not feel abstract or invisible to them, but arranged in space like a physical structure. Days, months, or years appear as shapes, lines, or landscapes in their mind. The past might sit behind them, the future stretch to the right, or an entire year appear as a loop they can mentally walk through. This is not imagination in the casual sense. It is perception shaped by how their brain organizes information. For these individuals, time is not something that passes. It exists. Memories occupy locations. Future events feel closer or farther depending on where they appear in this mental space. A deadline might feel physically near. A childhood memory might feel distant in a literal direction, not just emotionally. Their brain turns chronology into geography. What makes this emotionally striking is how different it feels from the common experience of time slipping away. For spatial time perceivers, time can feel stable, even navigable. They can mentally look ahead or step back with clarity. This can make planning easier, memory stronger, and patterns more visible. But it can also make certain moments harder to escape. Painful events may feel permanently located, impossible to fully leave behind. This phenomenon exposes how subjective time truly is. You assume everyone experiences past, present, and future roughly the same way. They do not. The brain constructs time the same way it constructs color or sound, using neural shortcuts that feel universal only because you've never experienced another version. Emotionally, this can be destabilizing. If time can appear as space, then the feeling of being stuck or rushed is not just circumstance, but perception. Your relationship with time is not dictated solely by clocks. It is shaped internally, quietly influencing urgency, nostalgia, and hope. The deeper implication is unsettling. Time does not exist in your mind as it exists in the world. It is translated, rendered, interpreted. Some people walk through it. Others feel chased by it, and neither experience is more correct than the other. Time is not something you observe from the outside. It is something your brain builds around you, determining whether life feels like a straight line, a loop, a wall, or an open field stretching forward. You could be someone's favorite stranger. And you would never know it. Somewhere in another person's memory, you exist as a moment that stood out against the blur of everyday life. You did nothing extraordinary. You simply crossed their path at the right time. A brief conversation, a shared look, a small kindness, or even just your presence became meaningful because of what was happening inside them, not because of anything you intended. Human memory does not archive events fairly. It highlights moments that arrive during emotional vulnerability. Someone may have noticed you during a day when they felt invisible, lost, or overwhelmed, and your existence interrupted that feeling just enough to matter. You became proof that something good could happen unexpectedly. That feeling attached itself to you. What makes this emotionally powerful is the imbalance. You continued on with your life unchanged, while a version of you stayed behind in someone else's inner world. They may remember your face, your voice, or simply the way you made the world feel for a moment. That version of you does not evolve. It does not make mistakes. It exists exactly as it was experienced. This reveals how influence works quietly. You do not need intimacy to matter. You do not need permanence to leave an imprint. Human beings are constantly forming emotional bookmarks around moments that help them feel less alone. Sometimes you become one of those bookmarks without consent or awareness. The unsettling part is how little control you have over this. You cannot choose who remembers you or why. Your smallest actions ripple outward into lives you will never see again. You are woven into stories that will never include your perspective. This reframes significance. Meaning is not always loud or mutual. Sometimes it is asymmetrical, invisible, and unacknowledged. You move through the world assuming neutrality, unaware that for someone else, you represent warmth, comfort, or hope tied to a fleeting encounter. You may be forgettable to yourself, but unforgettable in exactly the way someone else needed at that moment. Your voice sounds different to you than to everyone else. Your voice sounds different to you than to everyone else, and this difference is not subtle or imagined. When you speak, you hear your voice through two paths at once, sound traveling through the air and vibrations moving directly through the bones of your skull. Bone conduction amplifies lower frequencies, making your voice sound deeper, richer, and more familiar to you than it ever sounds to others. Everyone else hears only the airborne version. That version lacks the internal resonance you're used to, which is why recordings of your voice often feel unsettling or even embarrassing. It's not that the recording is wrong, it's that it removes the version of your voice you've identified with your entire life. You are suddenly hearing yourself as the world always has. This moment can be emotionally jarring because voice feels personal. It carries identity, confidence, vulnerability, and presence. When the external version doesn't match the internal one, it creates a small identity rupture. You sound less like you than you expected. The brain reacts not to the sound itself, but to the mismatch between expectation and reality. What makes this deeper is how long the illusion lasts. From childhood onward, you build self-image using a voice no one else ever hears. Your inner version becomes your baseline, shaping how you think you come across. Meanwhile, everyone around you responds to a different sound entirely, forming impressions you never fully experience firsthand. This creates a quiet asymmetry in human interaction. You are always partially unknown to yourself, even in something as basic as your own voice. Self-perception is filtered, internal, and protected. External perception is raw, immediate, and out of reach. The unsettling implication is that this gap exists everywhere, not just in sound. The person you believe yourself to be is always constructed from inside information. The person others experience is built from signals you can never fully access. Your voice simply makes that gap audible. You speak believing you know how you sound, but you are always hearing a private version of yourself. The world hears another, and between those two versions, identity quietly forms, never fully shared, never fully aligned, yet convincing enough that you rarely notice the difference unless a recording forces you to confront it. Your brain filters out your nose from vision constantly. Your brain filters out your nose from vision constantly, even though it is always directly in front of your eyes. Right now, your nose is occupying part of your visual field, casting light, shape, and shadow onto your retinas. The reason you don't see it is not because it isn't there, but because your brain has decided it is irrelevant. Perception is not about seeing everything. It is about seeing what matters. From early childhood, your brain learns that your nose never provides useful information. It never signals danger, novelty, or opportunity. So, your visual system quietly subtracts it. This filtering happens automatically and continuously, without effort or awareness. Your brain edits reality in real time, removing constant elements so you can focus on change. Motion, contrast, and unpredictability are prioritized. The familiar is erased. Emotionally, this reveals something unsettling about consciousness. You trust what you see, assuming it is complete. In reality, you are only seeing a curated version of the world. Your brain is not a camera. It is an editor. It removes what it deems unnecessary long before perception reaches awareness. You do not notice the absence because the absence feels normal. This filtering extends far beyond your nose. Your brain ignores background sounds, familiar faces in crowds, constant discomforts, and even ongoing emotional states. What is stable fades into invisibility. What changes demands attention. This is efficient, but it comes at a cost. Important things can disappear simply because they are always there. The emotional weight of this lies in implication. If your brain can erase something as obvious as your nose, what else is it removing? What parts of your environment, your body, or your emotional life have become invisible through familiarity? You are not seeing reality as it is. You are seeing what your brain allows through. The world you experience is shaped by subtraction as much as inclusion. Your nose is proof that absence in perception does not mean absence in reality. It means your brain decided you didn't need to see it to survive. And that decision is being made constantly, silently, shaping your experience without ever asking for your consent.
There are places where time literally runs slower.
There are places where time literally runs slower, and this is not metaphor, illusion, or poetic language. It is a measurable physical reality. Clocks placed at different altitudes or moving at different speeds will fall out of sync, even if only by tiny fractions of a second. Time does not pass uniformly everywhere. It bends, stretches, and shifts depending on gravity and motion, quietly refusing to behave as a constant. This happens because time is woven into space itself. Stronger gravity pulls not only on matter, but on time. The closer you are to a massive object, the more slowly time passes relative to somewhere with weaker gravity. High above Earth's surface, time ticks slightly faster than it does at sea level. The difference is small, but it accumulates. Over long periods, the gap becomes undeniable. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how completely this contradicts intuition. Time feels universal. It feels shared. You assume everyone is moving through the same now, but that assumption is wrong. At this very moment, different versions of now are unfolding across the planet. No single present exists that everyone inhabits equally. Your brain smooths this over because awareness of fractured time would be paralyzing. You experience continuity because your perception demands it, not because reality guarantees it. The idea that time can stretch and compress undermines the feeling of stability you rely on. It suggests that even the flow you trust most is conditional. The deeper discomfort comes from scale. If time can slow on Earth, it can slow dramatically near massive objects like stars or black holes. Entire lifetimes could pass for you while barely a moment moves elsewhere. The universe does not share time fairly. This reframes existence itself. You are not just moving through time, you are embedded in a local version of it, shaped by where you are and how you move. Your experience of duration feels absolute only because you have never left your reference frame. Time feels steady because you are trapped inside one slice of it, unaware of how differently it behaves everywhere else. You can feel phantom vibrations from phones. Even when your device is nowhere near you or hasn't moved at all. The sensation feels precise, familiar, and convincing, enough to make you instinctively check your pocket. Your brain generates the feeling without any external stimulus, responding to expectation rather than reality. This happens because the brain is deeply predictive. Once a behavior becomes habitual, the brain begins anticipating it before it occurs. Phones train this anticipation aggressively. Notifications are unpredictable, emotionally charged, and socially meaningful. Over time, your nervous system becomes primed, constantly scanning for the signal that connection, validation, or urgency has arrived. When the expectation peaks without fulfillment, the brain fills the gap. Neurologically, the sensation is real. The brain misinterprets normal bodily signals, such as muscle tension or fabric movement, and labels them as a vibration. The body does nothing unusual. Perception does. Your awareness assigns meaning before verifying truth. The feeling isn't imagined in the casual sense, it is constructed. Emotionally, this is unsettling because it exposes how deeply technology has merged with your nervous system. The phone stops being an object and becomes an extension of attention. Your brain reacts as if being summoned, even in silence. The possibility of contact is enough to trigger sensation. This reveals something uncomfortable about control. You are not just using technology, your body has adapted to it. Anticipation lives in your muscles. Absence becomes stimulation. Silence becomes suspicious. The deeper implication is about dependency without awareness. Phantom vibrations show how easily the brain rewires itself around expectation. It doesn't wait for reality, it prepares for it. And when preparation becomes constant, perception begins to blur. You feel called when nothing calls you. Your body reacts to the idea of interruption, not the event itself. In that moment, the boundary between external signal and internal anticipation collapses, revealing how quickly the brain can replace reality with readiness, and how quietly habits can embed themselves into sensation, convincing you that something happened simply because you expected it to.
Your brain is better at lying than telling truth.
Your brain is better at lying than telling truth, not because it is malicious, but because deception is often more useful than accuracy. The brain evolved to keep you functioning, not to present reality as it objectively is. When truth threatens stability, confidence, or emotional balance, the brain quietly edits, reframes, or replaces it. What you experience feels honest, even when it isn't. This happens because truth is complex and often uncomfortable. It requires uncertainty, contradiction, and patience. Lying, on the other hand, can be efficient. The brain simplifies stories, exaggerates certainty, and smooths inconsistencies to preserve a coherent sense of self. It fills gaps in memory, justifies decisions after they're made, and retroactively explains behavior in ways that protect identity. You don't feel these lies forming. You feel clarity. Emotion drives this process. When truth threatens self-worth, belonging, or safety, the brain prioritizes emotional survival. It reframes rejection as indifference, failure as bad timing, fear as logic. These distortions reduce distress and allow you to keep moving. To the brain, a believable lie that keeps you functional is better than a truth that overwhelms you. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how convincing the lies feel. Confidence increases when the brain commits to a narrative. Doubt fades. The story hardens. Over time, repeated explanations become beliefs, and beliefs feel like facts. You defend them instinctively, not because they are true, but because they feel necessary. This is why self-deception is so powerful. You are both the storyteller and the audience. There is no external correction unless something breaks through emotionally. Facts alone rarely do it. Threat does. The deeper implication is uncomfortable. Much of what you believe about yourself, others, and the past may be optimized for comfort, not accuracy. Your brain is not trying to deceive you. It is trying to protect you. Truth requires effort, vulnerability, and tolerance for discomfort. Lies arrive automatically, polished and reassuring. And because they come from inside you, they feel like insight. Your brain lies well because, for survival, it learned that feeling right often matters more than being right. You've probably laughed at something that wasn't actually funny. You've probably laughed at something that wasn't actually funny, and the reason has very little to do with humor. Laughter is not just a response to jokes. It is a social reflex, a pressure release valve, and a survival signal. Your brain often deploys it automatically, long before you consciously decide whether something deserves it. This happens because laughter evolved as a tool for bonding, not entertainment. When you laugh, you signal safety, alignment, and belonging. In social situations, your brain constantly scans for cues about acceptance and threat. If others laugh, your nervous system may follow instinctively, using laughter to stay synchronized with the group. The goal is not truth. The goal is connection. What makes this emotionally revealing is how little control you sometimes have. You may laugh out of discomfort, anxiety, surprise, or confusion. Awkward silences, tense conversations, or moments of uncertainty can trigger laughter simply to fill the gap. In these moments, laughter becomes armor, protecting you from vulnerability or judgment. This exposes a deeper truth about emotion. Your reactions are not always honest reflections of what you feel. They are often strategic. Your brain prioritizes social harmony over accuracy. It would rather you laugh at the wrong moment than risk standing out, being misunderstood, or rejected. The unsettling part is realizing how often authenticity is negotiated rather than expressed. You may believe your laughter represents joy, but sometimes it represents relief, fear, or compliance. You laugh to smooth edges, to diffuse tension, to signal, "I'm safe to be around." This doesn't make laughter fake. It makes it multifunctional. A single sound can carry many meanings at once, most of them unconscious. When you laugh at something that isn't funny, your body is speaking a language older than humor. You are not responding to the joke. You are responding to the moment, the people, and the emotional stakes surrounding it. The laughter feels spontaneous, but it is deeply informed by context you never consciously process. Your mouth moves before your mind asks why. Your mind can create fear with zero external threat. Your mind can create fear with zero external threat, and when it does, the fear feels just as real as if danger were standing in front of you. Your heart races, muscles tighten, breathing changes, and your body prepares for survival, even though nothing in the environment requires it. The threat exists nowhere except in perception, yet the response is immediate and intense. This happens because the brain is not designed to wait for proof. It is designed to anticipate. Fear evolved as a protective shortcut, prioritizing speed over accuracy. When the brain detects patterns that resemble danger, memories, thoughts, imagined futures, it activates the same survival circuitry used for real threats. The body cannot distinguish between an actual threat and a vividly imagined one. Belief alone is enough. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how little control you have in the moment. You can know logically that nothing is wrong while your body insists otherwise. Reassurance arrives too late. Fear acts first and explains itself later, if at all. This creates a sense of betrayal, where your own mind becomes the source of distress. The brain pulls material from memory, imagination, and expectation, weaving scenarios that feel urgent and personal. A single thought can trigger a cascade. The fear does not need to be rational. It only needs to feel possible. Once activated, the nervous system commits fully. The deeper implication is about trust. You rely on your mind to interpret reality, yet it is capable of generating convincing danger from nothing. This means safety is not solely determined by circumstances, but by interpretation. Peace becomes fragile, dependent on internal regulation rather than external stability. This capacity for self-generated fear explains anxiety, dread, and panic that appear without cause. It reveals that the most powerful threats humans face are not always outside them. Sometimes fear is not a reaction to the world, but a world created inside the mind, complete with urgency, consequence, and pain, demanding attention even when reality offers none. You are always one thought away from a different life path. You are always one thought away from a different life path, even when your life feels fixed, repetitive, or already decided. A single thought can quietly reroute everything. a realization you can't ignore, a question you finally allow yourself to ask, or a doubt that refuses to stay buried. Nothing external has to change first. The shift often begins internally, unnoticed, until it reshapes what you choose next. This is because thoughts guide attention, and attention guides behavior. When a thought reframes what feels possible or intolerable, your brain updates its priorities. What once felt safe may start to feel suffocating. What once felt unrealistic may begin to feel necessary. You don't wake up in a new life immediately. You start noticing different options, different exits, different risks worth taking. Emotion is the catalyst. Thoughts that carry emotional weight stick. A thought tied to regret, longing, or relief has momentum. It lingers, repeats, and slowly weakens old assumptions. The brain is especially sensitive to thoughts that threaten identity or promise relief from pain. Those thoughts are not random. They are signals that your internal model of your life no longer fits. What makes this unsettling is how fragile continuity really is. The life you are living persists partly because certain thoughts never fully form. The moment one does, the story cracks. You see alternatives that were always there but filtered out. A different job, a different relationship, a different boundary, a different version of yourself. This does not mean change is easy. Most thoughts don't act alone. Fear, habit, and responsibility push back. But the path has already split internally. Once a thought redefines what you can tolerate, returning fully to the old life becomes difficult. The quiet truth is that life paths are not chosen once. They are renegotiated constantly. You are not stuck because change is impossible. You are stable because certain thoughts haven't yet outweighed others. And when one finally does, your life doesn't explode. It pivots. Slowly, subtly, but irreversibly, guided by a single thought that arrived and refused to leave. Your body knows you're alive before you do. Your body knows you're alive before you do, and this reveals a quiet hierarchy between biology and awareness. Long before a thought forms, before identity, language, or memory appear, your body is already acting in service of survival. Heartbeats regulate themselves, lungs breathe without permission, cells repair damage, fight threats, and maintain balance while you are still asleep, distracted, or unaware. Consciousness feels like the center of existence, but it is not the starting point. It arrives late. Your nervous system detects danger, adjusts posture, and prepares responses milliseconds before awareness catches up. You flinch before you decide to flinch. You pull your hand away from heat before pain becomes a thought. The body acts first, then informs the mind. This is emotionally unsettling because it challenges the feeling of control. You like to believe that awareness runs the show, that you are in charge. But much of what keeps you alive operates beneath permission. The body does not ask whether survival fits your plans or beliefs. It simply moves. What makes this profound is how protective this system is. Your body monitors oxygen levels, blood chemistry, and internal rhythms constantly, correcting small errors before they become noticeable. You experience stability because countless adjustments happen invisibly. Awareness is spared the burden of micromanaging existence. This separation also explains moments of disconnection. Anxiety can appear before you understand why. Calm can arrive without explanation. Your body often knows something your mind hasn't interpreted yet. Signals rise upward, not downward. The deeper implication is humbling. The sense of "I am alive" is not the cause of life. It is the report. You are informed of survival, not responsible for initiating it. Existence is already underway before awareness claims ownership. This reframes identity. You are not the engine of life inside you. You are the witness that arrives after the engine has already started, running quietly, relentlessly, and without needing your approval to keep you alive.
The universe might reset itself.
The universe might reset itself, not metaphorically, but as a real possibility considered in modern physics. Some theories suggest that the universe could collapse back into itself or transition into a new state, wiping out everything that exists and starting again under different conditions. This idea isn't born from science fiction, but from attempts to understand what happens when expansion, energy, and time reach their limits. What makes this unsettling is scale. Everything you know, stars, galaxies, history, memory, identity, would not merely end, but be erased so completely that no trace remains. Not destroyed in a dramatic sense, but overwritten. The universe wouldn't remember itself. There would be no ruins, no echoes, no evidence that anything had ever existed before. Your brain struggles with this because it assumes continuity. You expect stories to end, not restart. A reset implies that existence itself is temporary, not just life. It suggests that reality may be cyclical, disposable, or experimental, unfolding again and again without regard for meaning or outcome. The universe does not need permanence to function. Emotionally, this destabilizes significance. If everything can reset, then permanence is an illusion, and legacy becomes fragile. Yet at the same time, it reframes importance. Meaning stops depending on endurance and starts depending on experience. Things don't need to last forever to matter while they exist. The deeper implication is humility. Humans search for final answers, ultimate endings, and permanent truths, but the universe may not be built for closure. It may only be built for motion. Expansion, collapse, rebirth, process over purpose. If the universe resets, it won't feel like an ending from the inside. There will be no moment of realization, no awareness of loss. Reality will simply stop being this version and start being something else, with no memory of what came before. And the unsettling part is not that everything might vanish, but that it could happen without the universe ever noticing that anything was lost at all. You can recognize emotions in stick figures. Even though they lack faces, detail, or realism. A few lines angled in the right direction can communicate fear, joy, anger, defeat, or confidence instantly. Your brain does not need accuracy to read emotion. It needs intention, movement, and context, and it fills in the rest automatically. This happens because the brain evolved to prioritize social survival. Long before language or detailed imagery, humans needed to read others quickly. Posture, orientation, and motion were enough to determine threat or safety. A bent shape signals vulnerability. An expanded stance signals dominance. These patterns are deeply wired, so even the simplest symbols activate them. Emotionally, this reveals how fast judgment really is. You feel emotion before analysis begins. A stick figure slumped forward feels sad without explanation. One leaning forward with raised arms feels aggressive or excited. Your brain does not ask whether the figure is real. It responds as if it represents a mind. What makes this unsettling is how easily emotion is projected. If a few lines can trigger empathy, then perception is doing far more work than reality itself. You are not reading the drawing. You are reading yourself into it. The brain supplies a story, a motive, a feeling, and treats it as meaningful. This explains why emojis work, why logos feel friendly or hostile, and why abstract art can feel emotional. The brain is a pattern detector, not a fact checker. It assumes agency wherever structure suggests intention. The deeper implication is uncomfortable. If your brain can extract emotion from a stick figure, it can misread people just as easily. You don't experience reality. You experience a simulation made by your brain. You don't experience reality. You experience a simulation made by your brain, and it feels real only because it has to. Raw reality is too vast, too chaotic, and too fast for direct access. Instead, Your brain constructs a live model using limited sensory data, past experience, and constant prediction. What you perceive is not the world itself, but your brain's best guess of what the world should be like right now. Your senses collect fragments: light, vibration, pressure, chemicals. These signals are incomplete and noisy. The brain fills in gaps, smooths edges, stabilizes motion, and removes contradictions. Colors are assigned. Depth is inferred. Objects feel solid. Continuity is invented. All of this happens before awareness arrives. By the time you feel present, the simulation is already running. What makes this emotionally unsettling is how convincing it is. You feel like an observer of reality, when in truth you are immersed in an internal reconstruction. Hallucinations, optical illusions, and perceptual errors reveal this system briefly, showing that perception can change without reality changing at all. The simulation adapts faster than truth. This model is not designed for accuracy. It is designed for survival. Your brain favors usefulness over correctness. It exaggerates threats, simplifies complexity, and prioritizes patterns that helped ancestors stay alive. Comfort, fear, beauty, and meaning are all layered onto reality by neural interpretation. The deeper discomfort comes from realizing there is no direct access point. You cannot step outside the simulation to check it against reality. Everything you know, feel, or believe passes through the same internal filter. Even doubt itself is simulated. This reframes certainty. You are not standing in the world looking out. You are inside a prediction engine, constantly updating a story that feels continuous enough to live inside. Reality exists, but you never meet it raw. You meet a version shaped for you, tuned to your biology, history, and expectations. Your experience feels solid because it must. If the simulation failed, so would your ability to function. Meaning, fear, love, and identity all emerge inside this constructed world. You don't experience reality directly. You survive inside a carefully maintained illusion that just happens to work.